Okay, welcome to this hearing for the committee's Modern Slavery Committee's inquiry into modern slavery risks faced by temporary migrant workers in rural and regional New South Wales. I acknowledge the Wiradjuri people, the traditional custodians on the lands of which we're meeting on today. I pay my respects to elders, past, present, and celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal peoples and their ongoing cultures and connections to the lands and waters of New South Wales. I acknowledge and pay my respects to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining us today. My name is Dr. Joe McGurr. I'm chair of the committee. Now I ask everyone in the room now to please turn their mobile phones to silent. Parliamentary privilege applies to witnesses in relation to the evidence they give today. However, it does not apply to what witnesses say outside of the hearing, and I urge witnesses to be careful about making comments to the media or to others after completing their evidence. In addition, the Legislative Council has adopted rules to provide procedural fairness for inquiry participants, and I encourage committee members and witnesses to be mindful of these procedures. Now, I welcome the witnesses here today. Thank you for making time to give evidence to us. Could each witness, starting from my left, please state their name and position title and swear either an oath or an affirmation. I just note, Mr. Datchie, you have already taken an oath and given evidence to this inquiry. You do not need to repeat that today. But if we can start with yourself, Mr. Stonestreet.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Brett Stonestreet. My position is General Manager with Griffith City Council. I swear that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
Thanks, Mr. Stonestreet. Councillor Curran.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Doug Curran, Mayor of Griffith City Council. I swear that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
Thanks, Councillor Curran. Mr. Matum.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Paul Matum. I'm the President of Leeton Multicultural Support Group, and I solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thanks very much, and welcome to you again, Mr. Datchie.
Thank you.
Would the witnesses like to make a small, brief opening statement before we begin with questioning?
I don't believe it. No, Griffith.
Mr. Maiden, would you like to make a...
Well, I'm not sure how much you want me to put into it. I just want to explain that in my role as the President of the Leeton Multicultural Support Group, I have day-to-day, week-to-week interaction with all these people that are affected and we're representing today. And I just think it's important that we're at the coalface. I think that is very important because I have some documents that I can present to the committee today at some stage to back up some of the terrible situations that I'm aware of in our community in Leeton, which I'm sure will be happening elsewhere, but we're aware of it in Leeton because we have the face-to-face discussion with these people going through these circumstances.
Mr. Datchie?
Yeah, I will an opening statement.
Will you have an opening statement?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'll proceed. There is no gainsaying the tremendous value the Pacific Australia Labour Mobility Scheme, also known as the PALM scheme, has brought to a region, both rural and regional Australia at large. Yet, vulnerabilities caused by disengagement from the PALM scheme poses the greatest threat to our efforts of fostering social cohesion here in the Riverina. The triggers for PALM disengagement are numerous, and I will not dwell on their legitimacy. What I do know, though, are heart-wrenching stories of suffering and pain experienced by disengaged PALM workers who are part of our community. These case studies have been meticulously documented in Leeton's case by Mr. Paul Matum, who's the Leeton Multicultural Support Group President. But the time for action is now. We can no longer afford to live in communities whose members, both lawful and unlawful. New South Wales can do the following. Appeal to the federal government to grant amnesty to all disengaged PALM workers to allow for rejoining the scheme or opt for voluntary repatriation, restoring integrity to previously disengaged workers and the program itself. Expand the funding base for Multicultural New South Wales, whose programming must include participants in the PALM scheme, using a whole of community approach, which was modeled by Dr. David Radford in the Learning from Leeton report. Pass legislation to regulate registration of labour hire agencies across the New South Wales state. Pass legislation to grant the Office for the Anti-Slavery Commissioner investigative prosecutorial powers to monitor employer conduct in the state. Advocate for federal government's departmental clarity on the overall responsibility for the management of the PALM scheme. And finally, revise the conditions on the 403 International Relations PALM visa. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Daci. Look, I wonder if, and thank you very much for your evidence previously, and we have previously heard from the Mayor and General Manager of Leeton Council, but I wonder if I could begin the questioning today with yourself, Mr. Matum, and Mr. Daci. I wonder if you could elaborate on what you referred to in your opening statement in terms of what you're facing in Leeton, the extent of the problem, perhaps some examples of the problem, so that we get your frontline experience of the problem. So could we start from there?
Yeah, in my case, I was previously the Mayor of Leeton for many, many years, and I'm Leeton Council, so I have a connection with our community, a strong connection, especially those in the multicultural groups that come to our town. In most cases of recent years, it's been the disengaged palm workers that have taken up a lot of the time, if you like, with Ken and myself and others. So we're seeing and hearing their story when they arrive in Leeton, and we wonder why it's not sort of, I suppose, been addressed, these issues, before it comes to us. So we're actually getting the tail end of the problem, which is a real issue to us, because we can't fix the problem, we only offer advice. But when we have these people sitting in front of us around a table and telling their story to us, it is very distressing to believe that we have a scheme like the PALM scheme that has great intent. We support it 100%. To see what we're seeing, which is the tail end of the situation where they're in trouble and they don't know where to turn to. They ring up the PALM hotline or the PALM grievance line. The experiences that they're giving me tells me that they're not getting adequate answers for their problems. Those that have told their employer that they were going to contact the PALM scheme, they've been threatened to say they'll have no job and they'll be sent back to their country if they complain about anything to do with the PALM scheme. And when we hear this, we're not just reacting to a conversation. Ken and I normally get some detail of what the situation is, where we'll ask them for their journey when they arrive in Australia. You have a situation with 8 or so people talking to Ken and I a couple of years ago, arrived in Australia, headed off to a packing plant up in Cairns and packing mangoes. The poor souls are sitting there telling us their story, that they've started work at 4 in the morning, they're working through till 8 o'clock at night, sometimes till 10 o'clock at night. But essentially then 35 days straight, some of these people were working, contrary to all the conditions under the PALM scheme. This is in an organised, structured way that they've been introduced to this opportunity to work in Australia and offer some support for their families back home on a wonderful scheme that, if it works properly, it is so great. We sit there, we listen to that. We really don't know where to go to, because remember, they're disengaged workers. They've been forced out of the system. They don't know where to go to, and in many cases they're hiding to a degree from the authorities because they're concerned that they don't have, well, they're disengaged workers, so in essence they're undocumented. And it is distressing to see. The pregnant ladies that have presented to me, 10 of in Leeton, many of those, or some of those are still in Leeton, some have disappeared in the bigger world out there, some are here in Griffith. But some of those people are in the situations that we don't even know where to go to, what advice to give them. I've spoken to DUA, I've outlined their particular circumstances, but I see nothing happening. I see a situation where a lady presents to me that had a baby 2 months premature here and that she's in Griffith Hospital. They have no health cover. They have no support. The only way that lady, amongst others, but her case was extreme, her baby was 2 months premature. She was in Griffith Hospital for quite some time. She then came out of hospital. Her accommodation, she had no money because she had no partner. That's her second child, by the way. Both those children are in the state wards now, by the way. That's an extreme case, but it's there. The lady wasn't even capable of going to work. It was only because I knew a guy from Pakistan that he was prepared to take her into the house and give her free rent, but on the condition that when she started working, She then paid back what was owed. She couldn't start back working again. Her condition didn't allow her to go back to work. So she has now disappeared out there somewhere in the big world. She pleaded with me. She was interviewed at the Griffith Hospital with the welfare people, and she agreed to hand the second baby over as she did the first baby, not knowing who the father was. And in essence, then she's ringing me because she said, I didn't know what to do, Paul, because I have no money, so I agreed to it, but I want my babies back. You know, you say to yourself, that's tough.
Can I just, so in terms of numbers of people that you've been handling in Leeton, when meeting, dealing, supporting in Leeton, can you give us some estimate of the sort of numbers of cases that you'd be dealing with, or?
Well, over the years, Ken and I have been very much involved. You know, we could have up to 10 people in a day sometimes, you know, and certainly 10 or more in a week, depending on the circumstances on how many come in with that cohort that are coming to our region to pick fruit. And they're transient, as you know. They can move in and move out. But Ken, you're probably meeting.
Last night, I met 10 disengaged workers in Leeton. 10. 5 women, 5 men. If we go back to 2023, on average, we're seeing even up to 15 disengaged workers per week. And that's why we were able to do a simple projection over a period of, say, 10 months. And approximately, you'll be talking about 300 disengaged workers in and out of our office for consultation. So would the numbers have shot up? I would say so confidently, because yesterday's little gathering of disengaged workers, there's 7 who hadn't met previously. And I've been located in Leeton 6 years now. And we've been on the issue of disengagement about 4 years straight. Yeah, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jenny, do you want to?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you all for being here today to bring some light onto these horrific situations. I wonder, my guess is, and Paul, you mentioned you were the former mayor, Ken, you're connected with the community, you know, people that are connected with councils are connected with community. How much is it known of where the exploitation is happening? So part of it is this idea of, yes, we know that in theory the PALM scheme can work for people. We know that we have workplace laws. We know we have laws around underpayments. We know we have tenancy laws. Like, all of these exist, right? There is obviously a disconnect somewhere between the workers who are in an exploited situation and people in between who understand what the laws are and choosing not to abide by them and not comply with them, and then the horrific sort of end results that occur where people get disengaged. Where is the breakdown between the different elements that exist that allows this to continue to get to the point where people are because I think that the disengagement is one thing, but before we get to the disengagement, where is that happening and where does it need to be better regulated? Yeah, please, Mr. Stonestreet, and happy to hear from all of you.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. I think the root of the issue here is when programs are developed, and for instance, the PALM scheme is one, but in the local government sector, there are a whole lot of programs that are developed at a macro level, whether it's state level or national level. But when those programs actually are implemented, it's not until the localised version of that program has the implications for people's lives. And therefore, there needs to be, at the front end of the development of programs, let's say the PALM scheme, there needs to be close communication and consultation with service providers, local government, but others at the local level who know the implications of the decisions of putting those programs in. Individuals, and the Mayor can make comment himself, but I know from my experience in Griffith, there is a reluctance of persons to actually shed light on where there might be a specific problem, because Mr. Maiden made mention of the vulnerability of individuals. They have no power. If they are disengaged, they're likely to be basically returned to where they came from.
Can I just pick you up on that,
yes.
Mr. Stonestreet, in the sense that I appreciate that it's very, the power imbalance is such that those individuals being exploited don't want to shed light on it, but presumably those people whose factories they're working in, farms they're working in, have more power. And then similarly, the people that know those people also have power, the labour hire companies, whoever. There are people that have more power in these interactions that obviously know that this exploitation is occurring.
Yes, look, I can't speak for individual employers, but individual employers have their own imperative as to why they exist, and they are concerned about the welfare of individuals. But they have a whole lot of pressures upon them, of which this is one of them. But if the framework's not in there behind the whole program, sometimes they don't feel it's their role to actually patch up the program or to make it right. And so, if they need lots of staff to keep their business running, and they see it as some, I suppose, other authorities' responsibility to make sure the welfare is in place for these individuals, that maybe there's a gap there. People fall through gaps.
Thank you. Did you want to
So as an organisation, councils probably aren't the first port of call for people that are suffering from this exploitation. So we probably don't see it firsthand, but when we hear from Ken and Paul about their experience and what we see anecdotally in our community is people that are reluctant to engage with authorities. So when there is an opportunity for them to plead their case, they're not sure where to go, and they seek support by groups such as we're represented with today, and that's where we feel the disconnect is. So we met with Australian federal government employees only last week for the Palm scheme, and there's no representative closer than Wagga. Now that's fine, except we know the epicentre for this is in this area, and our closest contact person is Wagga. Lovely young lady, absolutely not denigrating her at all, but it makes it very difficult for us. We were given a card and said, reach out to this number. But
if there are problems that you hear
if
about.
there are problems, but make sure you do it during business hours and not on a weekend. And I understand there's limitations, but that makes it very, very difficult. If the worker is working full time, how do they then make those calls, or who do they contact? And if the call, as was explained earlier, if the call isn't actioned immediately, where do they go? What do they do? Are there then ramifications on that individual, or do they then abscond and who knows where they go into the system?
And are there translation services?
It was explained to us that there are, absolutely, but again, what's the pathway to that? They ring a number. Do they even have access to phones? I mean, to that simple. They would go and visit registered employers, but they were unable to then visit unregistered employers, which is potentially where the exploitation is going to take place. What agency then does that? It doesn't fall on them. The police are probably not being engaged. I know from a council point of view, we're not being engaged. So there just seems to be a lack of that final step, which is engaging that person to try and improve their circumstances. And I'm not sure the answer, but it's certainly that last step that is missing, I believe.
Indeed, and to Mr. Stone Street's point then, there's no risk that you're going to get caught out. If there's no oversight, the closest person is in Wagga, they work from 9 to 5, you're exploiting workers in some area of Leeton or Griffith, the likelihood that you're going to get caught out for those that are doing the wrong thing is 0 to none.
It's extremely minimal, absolutely.
Yeah. Can I just add at the start of this that I'm not aware that we have all these people that are being, if you like, for want of a better word, ripped off in our Leeton area. In fact, most of the people I talk to, because I do know the people that do employ them, by the way, generally are paying them around about the right money per bin of oranges. So let's say that I'm aware of that. So in that regard, they are being looked after adequately, I suppose. But the whole issue is with the accommodation. Okay. And I'm not going to take anything away from this either, because remembering that accommodation that's not adequate for us is quite acceptable by them. Any accommodation is better than no accommodation. I have seen situations with people camped in backyards. I've seen situations with a few bricks and a bit of iron at the top and a fire going to boil the water, whatever it may be. I've seen all that, but I can't accept that. Yeah. But I can't then go to council and tell them this shouldn't be happening, because otherwise we have people who've got nowhere to go. So the whole system is designed, it doesn't, the dots aren't joined. They should be joined in a way that if you've got 50 people coming into your community, there should be an awareness by a local government, at least. I'm not saying they have to be responsible, but at least an awareness that we have that cohort coming into our town. Yeah. And are they going to be adequately given accommodation that's within reason? We don't have, our council being an ex-mayor, don't have the ability to get out there and check all those homes that are in our town. But I do think that we need to have an awareness that any accommodation is better than no accommodation. It will never be to the standard that we want, but it is acceptable to them. But when you see things that I have seen where you have -1 degree with a little baby 2 months old, which I have photographs to go with this, by the way, lying on the floor with blankets over it, nothing else in a little room as big as a laundry, with a mother and father. When you see that, you've got to say to yourself, it's pretty hard to walk away from that. But if you go and report that, you don't know where they're going to go after that. Yeah. So that is a real issue that we need to address, that the dots must be joined to say that, but an acceptance of the accommodation, because many of those accommodation places are farmhouses. And look, in many cases, I've been in a lot of those farmhouses, and look, they've got hot water and they've got general facilities there that are within reason. So I don't want to be taking that away, but remembering that in the extreme cases that I've seen, it is quite frightening. So how you link local government into it, I'm not real sure. Should there be a responsibility? The responsibility at this point is our small group of our Legion Multicultural Support Group, and we only have a very small core group that's there. So if we're not made aware of these circumstances, we don't know how widespread this is even happening. So it's most important. But one of the bigger issues that remembering all these people, once they become disengaged farm workers, they don't have a right to workers' compensation. Totally. They don't have a right to medical care. However, they do if you follow a pathway. And the pathway is that I normally introduce them to the hospital. I will tell them that they don't have any Medicare, and we will generally work something out. I then proceed to fill out what I call a hardship form. We had one guy, $61,000 was his medical account, $61,000 from Solomons. He's now back in the Solomons because we're able to get him back home. But he had a stroke. So that was looked after, when I say looked after, through a hardship form. He had $146 in the bank and he couldn't work because he had a stroke. So that's an extreme case. Another guy had the end of his finger taken off and his index finger in the right hand, found it very difficult to pick after he had that happen.
Indeed. Remembering
there's no work cover for these people. If we have an accident that is extreme, and dare I say it, there was a death, all hell will break loose out there because these people are working unbeknownst to the employer or the farm workers or the farmers that they don't have cover because they're just paying the money to the person that's supplying the labour.
Do you want to...
Yeah, I was just going to say, Mr. Major, if you want to table those documents, you should feel free to do that, and someone from the Secretariat will be able to take those documents from you. So you can table them, just so you don't miss that opportunity.
I'm just conscious of time.
Absolutely.
Ms Ayed, would you like to ask a question?
I do have a question. My question is for the Mayor, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Doug Curran, you're the current Mayor. So to Mr. Mayor and Mr. Brett Stonestreet. So considering budget restraints and funding from federal and state governments, what role can the local council realistically play in actually closing this gap that many of you have referred to?
Yeah, it's a great question. Everyone's budget's under constraints at the moment, and certainly from a financial standpoint, I don't feel that it is local government's responsibility. However, in saying that, it is our communities that are economic powerhouses that need workers that are great. In terms of agricultural input and output, we need these workers. So our community has responsibilities, but if the system isn't set up properly from the start, as Mr. Stonestreet earlier said, it will eventually break down, and it will be our communities that are left trying to support disengaged workers or even the engaged workers. We see engaged workers that are waiting outside ATMs and checking the ATM every 5 minutes to see when their money goes in, and not once or twice. We see it all the time. There's never any trouble, but the fact that that's where they virtually live, in front of an ATM, is so disappointing because it denigrates from the respect that they should be able to have, but it starts to denigrate from communities as well. So the support that we would do is advocating, making sure that we're engaging groups such as Paul and Ken's, but the rules against for refugees, all of those groups, we support Back Your Neighbour, all of those groups, but in terms of financial, I don't think local government should be left to carry that can. I'm more than happy for the General Manager to make comment.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. But can I say that the dilemma of the local government financial viability problem, which has been there for decades, the reality or the rubber hits the road when we have inquiries like this that need to be set up to investigate disintegration of services at the local level. So you'd be well aware of the local government funding from the federal government has dropped by 50% over the last 3 decades. There is an artificial rate pegging policy which all sides of politics have endorsed for several decades. Ultimately, that ends up with a bill shock at the end of the day. That's all it ends up being. And it's really unfortunate for our council. When I first started with Griffith City Council 14 years ago, can I say, looking at very, very closely at the financial position of council, my number one priority was to keep our council financially sustainable. And at that time, I needed to reduce my staff in order to fit within the envelope of sustainability. And can I say that support services for new citizens to Griffith were one of the areas that we needed to examine very closely, unfortunately, at that time.
Yeah. Okay, so essentially, through the Chair, if I may.
Yes.
So it would be sustainable for council to take on a bigger role in this area should the funding be available from the federal or the state government?
I would say absolutely, because we are the closest people to our communities. If there were positions funded by the state or federal government, then we would have the right people in the right places to have those conversations. However, far too often there's a short-term funding boost. We'll put a staff member on, and then 2 years later we're having a very difficult conversation about, despite all the good work that they've done, the need for us to look for savings, as the GM said, because that funding isn't perpetual. It stops in short periods of time.
Yeah, through the Chair, if I may, just last question. And this kind of model, if that was to happen, what would be the scope of these individuals who are then employed by local council, but of course funded by the federal or state government? What would the scope encounter? Would it go beyond checking accommodation?
I believe it would. If from a council point of view, if we get a complaint that there is accommodation that's taking advantage of individuals, we will investigate that. Far too often we hear that there is some, but when we say, well, give us the address, there's nothing forthcoming. So it's about engaging with that community, going to groups such as Paul and Ken's, so that we can hear firsthand that they're much more comfortable to go to that group and have those honest conversations than they are to council. So it's about having that conduit to get into that group and having somebody then be able to go out and proactively address those concerns, as opposed to reactively. We hear of bed hopping, so they'll go and investigate a house, and there'll be 5 people in the house, but then there's another 5 people in the house when that shift goes, and there's another 5 people in the house because there's so much work, there's so many people in the area, and that's only sustainable for a very short period of time. So absolutely, we just need that conduit.
Thank you.
I think Mr. Duchy wanted to come in on
Beg your
that.
pardon?
Were you wanting to come in?
Actually, the comment I wanted to put in is that when we're discussing gaps, is just to add to what's been submitted. Issue here is that we need proper oversight on employer conduct, and there is a mechanism for that. Yeah. We need proper oversight on what we call contracted service providers. There is a mechanism for that. If we join all these dots and then position local government far more strongly through a funding base, then we'll be able to address this issue.
Thank you. Dr. Kane.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you all very much for being here today and for the work you do in this space. And Mr. Duchy, carrying on from what you've just said, I'm struggling a little bit to put the pieces together, because I hear very clearly that there are systemic issues with the program. But the program is made up of various parties, and some of those parties are complicit in the experience that these workers are having. But what I've heard here today is that the responsibility, sensing the responsibility is more settled with the systemic issues. How is it that in a communities which are relatively, I guess, well known to each other, that it isn't known which organisations aren't doing the right thing, which farmers aren't doing the right thing? I worry that there's a level of complicity and a shifting of responsibility onto the system, or that's someone else's to check. Where, for example, Mr. Maton, your example of workers' comp, well, farmers aren't checking whether there's workers' comp. Well, that could be checked. There is responsibility for those at the top of the supply chain to check. So I just wondered if you have any comments about the system. Yes, there are clear issues, but it's made up of people within that system who have legal responsibilities, but also ethical responsibilities to make those checks. I just wondered if you had some comments on that aspect.
Well, it's extremely difficult to try and find a way around this because we don't know exactly how many people employed in our region that are disengaged palm workers. And when they're employed, they're not employed individually. They're employed as a body through an agency, if you like, or through an employer body. So that's all that the farmers care about. They want 20 workers, ring up, with 20 workers out they come. I can't give you any more information than that outside the fact who does those checks and balances, I don't know. All I know is if you're disengaged, there's no checks and balances in place. The only people that are doing that is us. We're doing the checks and balances.
Can I just jump in and follow up on that? Because I guess what we're trying to get at is the issues, whether they indeed are the employment issues or the accommodation issues, there are issues that are causing people to become disengaged.
Yes. Yep.
And so yes, leaving aside for a second the very real and serious issue that we need to deal with about the disengaged workers, there are reasons why people are disengaging.
Yes.
And presumably, to Dr. Kane's point, presumably people know which work sites people are disengaging from because the practices in those work sites or the accommodation supplied as a result of people going to those work sites is not up to standard, and so they're choosing to disengage. It's hard for us to comprehend the idea that that's not known to local communities that are connected, that know their local farms, that know the abattoirs, that know the workers, that get together at the pub or at church or whatever. People presumably know who these people are. Yeah. So yes, there is a systemic issue, but there is also bad actors, right?
Yeah. And we know the bad actors. You'll be given the evidence when these folks come into the office to explain why they disengage in the first place. But what happens to the bad actors? That's the question.
Yeah.
We don't have the power to prosecute. And so one of the recommendations we just read out is that we need to do something about effectively bringing to book those that have been reported to upholding bad practice or poor practice. That is a trigger for disengagement.
And Mr. Dutchy, in that case where you know the bad actors, right? I'm sure you know.
I do know.
I'm guessing everyone at the table knows, but you particularly have admitted that you know. If that's the case, is the issue with not being able to act the fact that the only avenue to act is to get those vulnerable workers to speak out? Surely the council or indeed other organisations could take that action to address the bad actors.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I jumped in, Dr. Kane.
No, I think
we're on the same page.
I think we're asking the same question.
This is why I've added the word mechanism. The mechanism does exist. When someone presents to our office or any of our spaces and says they've disengaged from the program, they give valid reasons, if you want to call them that.
Yes.
But then, how do we move from the validity of those reasons to prosecuting the bad actor?
Could I ask a follow-up question then?
Yeah.
Probably to council, and it's probably a question I should have asked all the councils we've had, so I'm sorry you're the one sitting in the chair at the moment. But I wonder then, has council, on discovering, being in the local community where there might have been these bad actors, does council take action or report to anyone or write letters? Perhaps not in that mechanism, but there are known authorities who might have an interest, including the Anti-Slavery Commissioner or Fair Work Ombudsman or others.
Federal Police, for example.
Does the council sort of proactively do that?
Yeah, I'll okay, go ahead.
No, I've got to say, hand on heart, we don't know who the bad actors are. They're reluctant to tell an organisation such as council. So personally, we don't know. We've had conversations around this. When we had the representatives from the PALM scheme out here 2 weeks ago, we asked them how many registered PALM workers were in our LGA. They didn't know. We asked them what percentage of those registered PALM workers, give or take, were disengaged. They didn't have those figures. They acknowledge that they don't have very good data sets and they're working on that, absolutely, so I'm not being critical of that. But if the people that set the scheme up don't know how many workers you have in an area, and local government areas are fairly easy to determine, how can the local government or the community be confident that they're aware? You may get represented by 7 people, but how many are in the background that are completely missed? So I just want to clarify, council, I don't believe, has a good handle on who those bad actors are.
And can I just come in here? So those are the authorities responsible for administering the scheme. They weren't able to tell you how many PALM workers they had here locally.
In any local government area.
In any local government area. Could they tell you how many registered organisations? I presume there are organisations that are registered to take.
They said that we could go to their website and get that information if we chose to.
Right.
And then when we went to the website, it was very difficult to navigate.
I've been there.
Very difficult.
It's not possible. I tried to put it together.
Absolutely. So you can go through, but you have to identify which organisation is represented in your community, as opposed to going in, typing in Griffith LGA. There was no search engine that would tell us. It would tell us each group, but we had to individually go through and say, yes, that group is represented in our community.
And so there are unregistered organisations who are also employing, use that word loosely, employing workers. But they must be employing disengaged workers or people not through the scheme, I would imagine. But
And
there's
they
actually...
indeed could be the same ones or not. We don't know.
It couldn't be the same. So by same ones, do you mean the employer that may have caused the disengagement in the first place? Not necessarily. What we do have in New South Wales, of which we've been trying to focalise, is the fact that the regulatory space around labour hire agencies is still absent.
Yeah, right.
And so it exacerbates a problem that may have been triggered elsewhere. The stories we do receive from disengaged workers could go as far as, in terms of a trigger, from somewhere far north Queensland to all the way down in Tasmania. So I normally say triggers of disengagement could be without our context. But the consequences of disengagement around the arrivals of these people is within our context.
Sorry.
Can I just add that, sorry.
Yes,
Chair,
Mr Maidham, and then
sorry.
Mrs McDonald wanted a question. But
Just in relation to those that are disengaged, we are not saying that there's people that are mistreating people in our town. We're saying that those who are working are actually being paid adequately for what they're doing.
Yeah, this is what
Most
I
of the
struggle
people, if not all of the people that we're seeing, are coming from elsewhere. They come to our office to talk with us and tell us what happened to them somewhere else. So in essence, remembering those disengaged workers we don't have a handle on because we don't have any checks and balances for them. Checks and balances are in place for those that are PALM workers that are working very happily in our region. I speak with those people. The program is working brilliantly for those people. So they don't have any reason to disengage. It's only when they're not working so well that they disengage.
So why are they ending up in Leeton?
They ended up in Leeton, in Griffith, in Shepparton, in Gatton, in Mildura. I mean,
Communities of commonality.
These people are transient. They're all over the place. I see some people one week. I go to the caravan park, meet them. Next week, there's 10 new people there. They've come from Gatton or somewhere else, you know. So they've heard about Leeton. They've heard about Griffith. They know it's a good opportunity to make some money. And they feel that they can do better by working in the open workplace, if you like, rather than be controlled, where they have a whole lot of deductions and other things and mistreatment in some cases. But what I'm saying is, to the way I see it, I'm not aware of any employer that's employing people under the PALM scheme in our town that are mistreating these people, because there are proper checks and balances done.
these are registered employers.
These are registered employers
Yeah,
under
okay.
the PALM scheme. So it's not so easy to do the checks and balances on what we're talking about here today on those that are disengaged. Only us. We can do that. And I'll tell you, they don't trust the system. When we have status resolution, we've had 3 times status resolution come to Griffith and Leeton. We've had people come along and meet with those representatives from Home Affairs, And in essence, they're fearful now of meeting any of these people because they're fearful that it's going to be sent back. I think it's important that one of the major recommendations that I made to DUA when I met with them on the 24th of October last year, and I'll table that too, by the way, that in essence, that we said we have to have an amnesty. We can't just go out there and grab all these people and do as they might do in some other country and take them away. We have to have a managed program where we can get our house in order, and the farmers need these workers in many cases that are disengaged, maybe not legal, but they're there. Let's have an amnesty that essentially gives an opportunity to see how many we've got out there in our region, to see what we can try and do, not 28 days. 28 days on status resolution gives them no work rights.
Yeah.
No work rights whatsoever.
Mrs McDonald would like to ask a question. I'm just conscious of time. Thanks.
I have many questions, but I'll stick to one. And so, Mr. Douchy, how do you see, like, with the current visa conditions and the structural settings contribute to the vulnerability of temporary migrant workers? And how do your recommendations, particularly around, say, flexible employment arrangements and mobility, seek to address those? So I guess it answers with regard to disengaged workers.
Yeah, the 403, I'm sorry. Can I proceed? Yeah, thank you. The 403 international relations visa that's linked to the PALM scheme is very restrictive. You just need to have a glimpse of a copy of that visa to understand just how difficult it is to be a holder of the visa and to have a situation where you necessarily feel either exploited or ill-treated and with the need to do something about your situation. Now, if you look at how a visa is structured, the only option available to someone who feels aggrieved in their employment is to resort to applying for asylum. So there's been conversation around why there is a surge in asylum seeker applications from previous PALM scheme visa holders. That is your answer. Yeah. There isn't recourse to any other option based on how that visa is structured. The recommendation being put forward is that all the conditions on that visa need revision. And worker portability is an integral component in that visa and needs to be activated. Situations where we've had community workers reporting disengagement, they would certainly cite economic reasons. So, for example, wage theft, unclear deductions. If someone like that would exercise the right to move to a different employer, you'd reduce the chances of disengagement. So the overall architecture that informs the PALM scheme from a visa point of view is in dire need of reform.
Yep.
I think we'll just have to finish there. The session's ended in terms of time, but can I just thank all of the witnesses for appearing today. The Secretariat will contact you in relation to any questions on notice. I presume that you would be happy to answer those subsequently from the committee. Thank you very much. I do know, Mr Maidham, you've tabled some documents with us which we'll circulate to the committee. They're quite graphic, so we'll pass those to the committee members. Thank you for doing that. And I'll excuse the witnesses and we'll proceed to the next session. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank
Yeah.
moving, and as I say, Pastor Jerry tells me he's 10 minutes away. He's going to text me when he's arriving. Someone could go out and, arrive. Okay,
So we're
welcome.
waiting for Pastor Jerry, or?
No, we'll keep start. I think we'll
We'll
start.
We'll
shall we?
start if that's okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right, welcome, Ms. LaRocca. Thank you very much, and welcome back, Mr. Daci. We'll continue with our questions, but before we do that, Ms. LaRocca, can I get you to please state your name, position, and swear either an oath or an affirmation?
Yeah. My name is Carmel LaRocca. I'm President of the Multicultural Council of Griffith. And I solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much. Would you like to make an opening statement?
The Multicultural Council of Griffith is at the coalface of all the dramas that have been going on with the absconders, palm workers and whatever in the community, and the general migration as well. We are not funded at the moment. We used to be many years ago, but that's another story. And if you'd like to hear that one day, I will tell you that. However, because the organisation was weakened to a state where we weren't involved at the time, where it was so weak, we had to build it back up and get the confidence of the community back, which took many years to do because it was so badly trashed at the time. So we built it up. We keep harmony in the town by providing volunteer services to anyone. Doesn't matter how complex the issues. And we set up events that bring the community together, such as the yearly Multicultural Festival, our yearly street parade we're about to start this year, community markets, whatever. And we assist the communities to set up their events as well and encourage them to incorporate so they can represent their own communities. We do all those things and more.
Thank you. Can I, and this question is for yourself, Ms. LaRocca, and also for Mr. Daci. We've heard this morning about numbers of disengaged workers in very difficult circumstances. And there's been a lot of discussion about employers and people in the community who should know the employers that are not doing the right thing, and so on, and why is that the case? You know, why are they not doing the right thing? I'm just trying to get it clear in my own mind what's happening here. And it seems to me that in both Griffith and Leeton, there are a number of people who've disengaged from the PALM scheme, for example, from other parts of New South Wales and Australia, and for some reason have come here. And clearly they're in a very difficult situation because having disengaged, their visa status is questionable, and if they're going to work, they're going to end up working in a very vulnerable situation, to say the least. So that's one group. I suppose a second group would be people who are registered on the PALM scheme, working for registered workers who are happy, whose conditions are good. Again, there are issues, I think, about health coverage, workers' compensation, but that's a group of people that are working as the scheme should operate. So there's those two groups. Is there a group locally of people who are not being treated well by local employers? It sounded as though from the evidence earlier this morning that that's actually not generally the case, that local employers in both communities are trying to do the right thing. I just want to try and clarify that. Are either of you able to make a comment on that?
Do you want to go?
Okay, I'll go for it. For the third group, let me begin with the third group. The third group, I've heard of one incident this year, and that's visibility right across the Leeton LGA, one incident. And procedurally, the necessary steps have been taken, contacting Legal Aid New South Wales, Fair Work Ombudsman, the necessary wraparound supports around the case, in force and in action, so hopefully it will be resolved. Just last one.
Okay, so really the group that we're concerned about here is a group of disengaged workers from across New South Wales and indeed Australia who have found their way to this region being supported.
Correct.
And of course, they then are in a very vulnerable position in terms of getting employment and can be exploited and do get exploited. Okay. And of course, the people who are exploiting them, that's the question about surely we should know who they are.
We should know who they are.
Who they are in the community, but there seems to be a tacit, or a tacit understanding we don't talk about that or we don't recognise it.
But to the degree, you see, the tricky thing with PAM is this, is that I'll keep reusing the word mechanism. There are key contracted parties that should ensure administratively when we have incidences like with disengagement, we can get to the root of the problem, either by identifying the questionable employer and following due process, whether that involves prosecution or bring them to book, generally speaking. Now, that exists on paper. So if you look at an employer deed, for example, if you look at the work that the Community Connections program is supposed to be doing, on paper, clearly defined, that's the case. But do we see it in our context where there's been disengagement cases reported? No. Now, the second group, if I could just add, the second group you accurately defined are those still on the program, located in terms of work at approved employer locations right across our geography. And the reason why that would be working, and generally speaking, those workers would be happy if situations arose, they would get the necessary attention, is that, again, there is a mechanism of support around it. So case in point, one large employer in Lytton has what we call a pastoral coordinator. So overseeing close to 104 workers who are still on the PALM scheme, but that horizontal relationship and ongoing contact on a day-to-day basis has made a huge difference. That person liaising with ourselves as the wider network of community supports makes it such a systematic way of providing oversight on their welfare. Now, that's with folks who have employers who are pulling best practice. The opposite holds.
No.
Maybe
Have to
Mr.
disagree
Duchy on
with
notice.
Ken. Sorry.
Oh,
Yeah.
please proceed.
Sorry.
I was just going to say on notice, if you can share any more details about that best practice model
Oh, yeah.
as a thing, that would be really appreciated.
And that's very helpful.
Whether that's the employer or whether that's the labour hire company, because when you say
No,
employer,
that's a very good question. That's a direct employer.
direct
Yeah.
employer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, but that is
That's
that's a very good illustration actually of what could happen
Yeah.
and perhaps what isn't happening in certain circumstances where people are disengaged. But as you say, there's no mechanism. There is a mechanism on paper,
Yes.
but it doesn't operate
Yes.
for dealing with people who are in a situation where they have no choice but to disengage. There's no
Exactly.
mechanism for following up. There's no grievance mechanism that works for those people, and hence they wind up in different parts of the country, extremely vulnerable because they have to work for cash, they don't have a legal status, and it falls to community organisations to support them. Okay, now I'm sorry, Mr. LaRocca, please.
I have to disagree with Ken. PALM scheme out here, they're everywhere, right? And especially in the big farms, not so much in our own LGA, except for the meat works, the chicken factory, but they work on larger farms just outside our jurisdiction here, say Murrumbidgee, Hillston, out that way, and further out. So they employ a lot of PALM worker groups on rotational basis. We've just been alerted by people on those schemes that no, they're not happy, right? They tell us that they're not being treated well by the employer in terms of the approved employer, because let's face it, the farmer is the one they work for, or the company, but they rely on the approved employer, right? So the approved employer is responsible for the workers, okay? all their entitlements and things like that. There have been many accidents on the farms that we've heard about lately, and that's because of the way that the hours are structured, the breaks and all that, and also the type of work some of them do. They work very long hours. This is what's been told us. We're helping a few people at the moment, and we've helped others outside of Griffith as well, where they suffered through the approved employer. And so the PALM scheme is a good scheme, but the management of the PALM scheme needs really urgently to be revisited and mechanism put in place where people go out to the farms and see how the workers are doing and give them make them understand what their rights are in Australia and who they can contact and how. The liaison officers, or their new name is, I think, community engagement officers, are far and scarce in between, right? There should be more of them. It's not good enough to have 2 for the whole state, for example. If you're going to have these people, there must be enough that they are able to visit the sites and talk to the workers and tell them that they can get pastoral care. If they have issues, they can contact them. They should be the first contact of call as a pastoral carer. I think the liaison officers are partly pastoral carers as well. I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure on their role. But the thing is, this is not happening.
Can you just clarify, Ms LaRocca, who the liaison officers are in this context? Are you saying liaison officers for the federal government, or are you saying liaison officers through the...
We only know of one liaison office in Tasmania for, say, the Tongan community.
Right.
We know of one from Kiribati that I think is in Griffith. I've met one briefly or twice.
Yeah.
I haven't met him enough times.
Yeah.
And now you've got the community engagement officers. There's one for this area from Sydney.
Yes, it's from community. I think that's through community connections.
Yes.
So
Is
just
that right? And then the liaison officers are sitting within a federal government
Yes.
department? Right, okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. But
So-
Right.
Yeah,
Can
so-
you just clarify so the liaison officers that you mentioned for Kiribati and based in Tasmania, so who would employ
no,
them?
the Kiribati one I think is based around here. I'm not sure
Okay,
it comes
right,
and
yeah.
goes. I'm not really clear on that one.
Do you mind taking that on notice and just trying to clarify to it?
Sure.
What we're trying to get a sense of is, do roles exist that would be the right way to monitor this,
Yeah.
but there's just not enough of them?
No.
Or is it that the agencies themselves aren't taking that responsibility? So if you're happy to take that on notice,
Yes.
it would be great to know who your connection points are that you're seeing the liaison, who might employ them. That would be
I
great.
would be really happy to do that
Thank
because
you.
it's really important.
Yeah, absolutely.
So can I just for my own, just to be clear, you're saying, Ms LaRocca, that you are receiving a large number of people coming to you who are on the PALM scheme with a registered organisation who are not happy, hours of work, conditions of work, potential for accidents, accommodation, and your point is that they've come to you because they don't have another mechanism for raising their concerns.
Yes. And with us, because we're not visible on the street, and this is our problem, because we need to urgently have a multicultural hub in Griffith, where these hundreds of people that access us through word of mouth, they can actually just come in any time of the day, right? At the moment, because we're not visible, they find us and then they call us and we deal with their issues, right? But we need a multicultural hub in Griffith because there are so many people here that need help.
So just acknowledging that, but just to go back to, just to clarify, the people who do approach you, they have tried other mechanisms for raising their concerns?
Yes. One guy, he got badly hurt last year, and he one day just called me out of the blue and he said for months he had been walking around Griffith looking for someone to help him resolve his issues, and he couldn't find anybody. So, and we've been able to resolve pretty much all his issues, it's just ongoing. But then he told the stories of the others on the PALM scheme and what they're going through. And it's not just around here.
And then this links into the relative lack of liaison officers who are not located locally, so they come to local community organisations. And I think it comes back to your point, Mr. Datchy, there is no mechanism for dealing with people who have no choice but to become disengaged from the scheme. Yep, okay. Right.
Can I? Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Miss LaRocca. Excuse me, my electorate is in the centre of Sydney, in Newtown, so this is not my usual area, it's not regional New South Wales, but one of the things that I would say that we know in Newtown is which restaurants underpay their staff or pay cash in hand, which ones don't, that kind of thing that informally happen, and every so often the Fair Work Ombudsman will do some checks on those, but there's a bit of what you would call local knowledge that exists, that people know how these things work and what happens. You obviously have strong connections to this community. Is there local knowledge about where the problems are and how they're working? And what is stopping people from sort of shining a light on those problem areas?
Going back to the absconders.
Yes.
Last year, when we were at the epitome of all the absconders that all came here, like I think we had 600 at one stage. Mm-hmm. Last year, with our, from my own office, we had a little bit of funding to employ someone for a few months between the two of us. We saw 1,700 people. That's over 12 months. And a bulk of those were the absconders. They didn't have BVEs, bridging visas, they didn't have nothing. They didn't have work rights. Yeah. So they are the ones that you're talking
1,700
about. Yeah, in
over
1
12
year.
months.
Yeah. And that includes other people too, but the bulk of them were these absconders. They came through Griffith and they only just found us because they just found us and they could just walk into my office. I'm no longer at that office, so now we are less visible than before, so people just find us. But those people were the ones that are being exploited because they have no work rights. So they're working for contractors out here that pay them or don't pay them.
Yeah.
Depends, right? So the ones who don't get paid, they then have to find other means of surviving. And it's always been a bugbear with us why you don't give work rights to a person in Australia.
Indeed.
Today.
Indeed.
Right? Because that's what leads to exploitation.
Absolutely.
Right? And that needs to change.
Yeah.
We're better than that.
Yeah. But then also moving one step up from the disengaged workers that don't have the appropriate visas to work, leaving aside our views on the fact that they should have work rights.
Yes.
There are people that are making money out of using their labour. Is that known in the community or not?
Well, they're very clever. It's not easy to find them, but they're out there.
Yeah.
Okay. So the approved employers or the approved contracts around here, you know who they are. And they're okay, you know, they pay their workers and whatever. Yeah. But there's another cohort of contractors or contractors that employ all the leftovers, I suppose, or the hangers-on or the ones who can't find work with the approved contractors and all that, or registered contractors, not approved. So those ones there are the ones that are exploitable by these other contractors. And
then the businesses that are needing, so the farms or the meat processing factories or whatever it is that are needing those workers, do you get a sense, Ms LaRocca, that they are using both the authorised and the non-authorised works, or are we talking about a completely separate industry?
Yeah, because the factories, they will not employ anyone without a work rights. So if they have work rights, it doesn't matter who they are, they will employ them because they're always in need of labour and they will pay them correctly. Okay. It's the other side on the agricultural side and other areas that are not so I suppose, easily visible to authorities that these disengaged workers in
Can you
other
give us an
groups.
example of what that might be?
Say, for example, on the farms, there's people that pay the workers and people who don't.
Right.
Then turn right on B87.
I'm just going to interrupt the
Please,
questioning there
please.
because Pastor Jerry has arrived, and welcome, Pastor Jerry. Good to see you. I just need you to take an oath or an affirmation, if you don't mind. So it should be in front of you there. State your name and title, and then make that oath or affirmation.
I, Pastor Jeremiah Rokosuka, swear that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
Thank you very much. Look, I'm going to ask you, because we've already started some questioning on this session, but I wonder if with the indulgence of the panel, I'll just start by asking you, you have had, I think, quite significant involvement with Pacific Island communities, particularly in this region and particularly in Wagga. I wonder if you could just tell us about your experience of people working on the PALM scheme and working from overseas in industries locally.
Just to start off, first of all, I moved into the riverine region the last 5 years. I've been involving with our PALM scheme workers who come across from Fiji, Papua New Guinea, the Solomon Island, the Kiribati, the Tongan, and the Vanuatu. Back home in Fiji is like about the Melanesian group, which we are known as. But I thank the Lord that He has brought me to Wagga for the last 5 years, and it was very, very bad, which I can say today. For me, looking after these people of mine, some of them save $80 a week. For me, having a family, a wife, and 4 children, on that time, myself alone are working. My background, I work as an engineer. So majority of my pay I use to look after the Solomon, the Papua New Guinea, the Fijian, the Solomon, the Tongan, and the Vanuatu. The church that I'm running in Wagga Wagga, as Mr. Joe know well, it is an interdenominational church. Regardless, the reason that I started this ministry is to feel people like home first. Second, not to put the name of Australia down, because everybody are calling back home. I want them to know that Australia is their real home. But regardless of the situation that they are facing, under the agreement that they are signed back home, this is something that they always done by the scheme that bring the labor from Tonga, from Solomon, and Fiji, which the Pacific Island I already mentioned. These are the countries that I'm looking after until today. It's very sad to say this morning. It is very sad. Some of them, like I already raised, $90 to have within them. It is not enough. Some of their families back home, they have house to pay, children, medical, school fees. And that is all what I was doing myself and my family, looking after this family until today. This is the 5th year, until today. So I've been chatting with the RWM chair. He came across and we had a chat. I fly to Western Australia regarding this matter. I've been traveling around Australia looking at this loophole, and I thank God that this is something that God allows. Me and Mr. Joe, we are very best, and we always share all this. And Mr. Michael McCormack, our riverine minister, and also our mayor from Wagga Wagga. It is very sad. I already mentioned to Dr. Cocaine came and we had a meeting last 2 months. I mentioned him, some of the workers, when they give a call that they are sick, we know the rules here in Australia, that they are sick. What the company does, they come home, pick them from home and take them to work. For me, it is a modern slavery, which I can, and there's many stories which I have for these past 5 years, I can share. Until today, I feed 200 people, until today. If you come to my church, after the church service, everybody will come to my house. I feed them every day. And they come, every day I have to receive calls, family situation, money, something that they are facing at the work. When they tell the boss that I am sick, when they tell the boss that this is the situation that I'm going through at home, all we know that Australia, our right is very important. But to say today, we are not doing our work. If there is something that we can look to it, this is something that I told some of the rep that represent the company for the last 5 years. I continue to fight for the rights of our loved one, because I don't want to put the name of Australia down, because I count this place as my home. So if there is a situation, if there is a point that that we can come together today to round it off on our conference day, just to help them in order to live a successful life, in order for them to enjoy the country that we call that this is our place, and for them to tell everybody in the world that Australia is the best place to come and live and invest for your next future.
Thanks, Pastor Jerry. Thank you. Yes, Mrs. McDonald?
I want to ask, Ms. LaRocca, you, in your submission, you said that you would like the inquiry or to come to Griffith, and I envisage it wasn't just to sit around a table. So if you had in charge of the agenda, what would you have us do today so that you could show us what, the dealings that you've had with everyday people? What would you have liked us to have seen today?
We need a multicultural hub. It's really important because that allows people, such as the absconders or those not happy with the scheme, to be able to contact us, and we can put them in touch with people who can help them, or we can further their help. The second thing is that the PALM scheme needs to manage their program in such a way that they're able to come out to the region often and visit the sites and make sure that the people are not scared to speak, because some of them are, right? And find out how to make the scheme better for everyone. So they come to Australia, they're happy to come here and work, and then they want to go back home. That's it.
Yeah.
So between the time they arrive and the time they're supposed to be going back home, many things happen that is not the same as what they were told. They're told one thing, then they come to Australia and something else happens. And even if they do understand English, they don't really comprehend the English. And even though there are numbers that they can call, they will not call those numbers because it's too difficult, right? And they can explain themselves.
Dr. Kane?
Just a quick one. Ms. LaRocca, thank you for being here and the work you do. In fact, all of you. You were talking about the fact that there are sort of large numbers of workers who operate, I guess, in the shadow economy, not with the registered employers. And I think we're sort of struggling to come to grips with what that looks like. And I wondered, for example, if you understood that there were particular subsectors or particular types of products that fall into that category. Like, are there sort of characteristics of the work that's done? If we don't know particular employers, do we know which areas are most susceptible?
Probably in the agricultural area.
Yeah, but within that?
It depends on the season.
Right.
Because agriculture is seasonal, so you might have citrus now, you might have almonds, that they usually picked with machines, but they're still workers. Then there's fruit and vegetables, or the vegetables and all those areas.
So I was just trying to see whether there was a particular product where there was more likely to be...
It's across the board.
It's across the board. So it's a question of each different product has better employers who are doing the right thing and are being undercut by these shadow employers, rather than there's a particular subsector that's a problem.
Because now, the last many years, contractors have appeared. So contractors pretty much have the labour. So it depending how good the contractors are, that's how the workers get treated. So when the farmer needs employees, they contact the contractor, or the contractor goes around and tells them that they're available, they've got workers, and they will talk with the contractors, not with the workers.
But the farmers must know which contractors sort of have been around a while, are reputable.
Yep.
They must understand that if there's someone who's just turned up, organises things just on a mobile phone, that they're not reputable. Wouldn't they have to know that?
I might have to take that on notice.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
But from the little bit that I'm aware of, because I'm not 100% full-time into this, is that when farmers have to pick something, they just have to pick. They can't wait. So if someone shows up a contractor and they've got labour, they're going to, if the contractor is a good contractor, they usually take those. If they're busy, then they'll go to the next one, who goes around the farms and tells them, look, I'm a contractor, I've got workers, do you have work, all that. So it's a bit like that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Can I ask Pastor Jerry? Pastor Jerry, you've described a situation of the work you've done in the last 5 years with the communities, particularly in Wagga.
Yeah.
And you described a situation, I think, where people raise concerns with you about their employment, and they talk to you about that. What are you able to do? Are they able to raise their concerns with anyone? Are you able to raise their concerns with anyone on the scheme? Are there any avenues you can use to assist them?
Thank you, Mr. Joy. There's a lot of concerning coming from the workers. The issue is like they were given a phone number which they have to call. It's a 24/7 landline number, which they were told if this is a situation, they have to call that number. But for the past 5 years, nothing have happened. We have raised this concern. I have had a meeting with them. We had a Zoom meeting for the last 5 years, but nothing has taken place. Like what I already mentioned, one of the big issues is like for them looking for the house for rent. That is one of the major problems here in, not only in Wagga. I've been traveling to the Gold Coast, like I already mentioned, to Western Australia, even to those who work at near Adelaide in the farms. To say this morning, it is very sad, because they have raised concern about, there's plenty of things I want to share this morning about the ways when they signed the contract. Now someone came home last 2 weeks and asked me if I can pay their rent. It's 460 because their leave were not paid. When there is a shutdown at work in Tees or in Juni, they have to take out, they have to pay by their annual leaves. The company is not paying them for the 5 whole days. So at the moment, the concern which we are trying to work with the scheme nothing has taken place. I have been paying rent. I have been paying the medical going out for the medical, because for us we have Medicare. for the workers, if there is something that we can look at today, it will be very good because of the weather. The season is different. Some of them are picking fruits. Some of them are working at the industry of the meat and the sheep. So all these industries are different. And bringing them from, some of them come from the villages, no training at all. Because of Australia, everybody wants to put their hands up. Let's go. Pick and go. So training must something that we have to look at too. For the government of Australia to be named #1 in the country, we have to look at the training. Someone here in Australia have to go to Fiji, to Solomon, to Papua New Guinea and make the training. This is Australia is like. We will pay the rent every week. You have to wake up in the morning and go to work. The lifestyle here is different. So before they leave the island, they have to adapt to the lifestyle that we are adapt to here in Australia. We wake up 6 o'clock, we go to work, come back, we have dinner in the afternoon, sleep early. But back home in the island, it's totally different. So this is something that we have to address. I already come up with this conversation with the labor hire, that the trainer should fly to Fiji or to Solomon, to Papua New Guinea, to Tongan, stay with them for a month, give them a good training before the pre-departure training, which they call the pre-departure training, which they call.
Pastor Joey, can I ask you, thank you so much for the insights you're providing. Can I ask you just to clarify in relation to you saying that for 5 years people have been calling this 24-hour hotline and nothing has happened?
Yeah.
Do you mean people don't answer the hotline or people make complaints and then no action is taken?
That's it. No action has been taking place. People have been calling and no answer at all.
So basically you're aware of people ringing the hotline, making
Yes.
complaints about their treatment,
Yes.
but then, so someone will take the complaint, but then
Nothing
no follow-up
happened.
or
No
action
follow-up.
happens?
No follow-up.
And do you see does that result in people not bothering now to make complaints because they know nothing happens?
That's it. And that is what I can say. That's why plenty people that come through this labor scheme mobility, which we call the Vuvale Partnership, have left the scheme.
Absolutely. And then...
because they were hurt. Because I think that they were told, signing the contract for us, we know that signing the contract, you have to abide by what you have signed.
Yes.
But if we are not looking after the people who signed the contract, this is what I told the RWM. If you feed your dog well at home, will he stay or he will leave?
Yeah. My understanding, Pastor Jerry, as well, to also just ask you another question, is that there are tragic consequences that occur as a result of people not being treated properly at work or being able to access health care. I wonder, are there any examples that you can give us of evidence that you know of where it has resulted in
I have people
tragic
at churches.
circumstances?
I have people at church that they can come and testify. I have them.
Yeah.
That they can come in because everybody come home to me. Mr. Joe and them, they know.
Yeah.
I've been dealing with one yesterday.
Yes.
He gave a call that he is sick. They know that he is sick, but they have to drive from the work, get him from where he is, and take him back to work. On this cold weather, he is sick, approved by the doctor, and that is the situation not only in Wagga. This is happening all over Australia, because I've been traveling all over Australia, reaching out to the Pacific Island people, trying to empower them that this is the place that we love to be. You have to work. You have family back home. For those who have families, children, you have the reason that
But
Australia,
no one should be working if they're sick, right?
That's it.
Yeah.
If Australia allow you to be part of this scheme, then you have to work. Children, you have a wife, you have to pay the bills. So that's why you are here in Australia. And that is what I've been doing for the last 5 years.
Yeah.
So I come up with the sum of the point because everybody, everywhere, like last Saturday, there's a group from Melbourne, they come across at home with this situation. So last week, Friday, so we had a very good conversation with them. And I thank Mr. Joe and the Member of the Parliament, Mr. Michael McCormack, and the Mayor for connecting me to the local business that enables to support me in order to meet their needs. Because some of
Ms.
them, like,
LaRocca, yeah, sorry, Pastor Joe. Ms. LaRocca, you were nodding in recognition
Yeah.
there. Did you want to contribute as well?
Yes, he's right. There are people on the scheme, and things seems to sort of calm down the last couple of months, 3 or 4 months. You don't hear as much unless someone comes to you, which in my case they have, and they were saying exactly the same thing with the group that he was working with and other groups that he's aware of, that the conditions, even though it looks everything's calm on top, they're not ideal like they're supposed to be. I just wanted to add, though, this exploitation has taken another ugly turn in Griffith and probably everywhere else. The absconders, or the ones who are disengaged, who have no work rights and they run out of money, and now these lenders have appeared on the scene where they're lending money to these vulnerable people. And we've heard more and more of this. It's happening around here, and I'm sure it's happening everywhere else too.
yeah.
And are these registered lenders or not registered lenders? Yeah.
They're just people they know on the street.
It's a concern.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. We've now reached time for that particular session. Can I thank all of the witnesses who've appeared this morning? I presumed you would be happy to answer questions that we forward to you, questions on notice. Thank you very much for agreeing to that. At this point, we will take a short break for morning tea and we'll return with the next hearing panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Dashi, for
Thank you.
staying.
No worries. Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right. Welcome to... I'll just check that we're right to go. Right, okay, welcome back after the tea break. Welcome to our witnesses. Thank you very much for appearing. My name's Dr. Joe McGurr. I'm chair of the committee, and we've done introductions and acknowledgements this morning to country. So I'd like to thank you, all of you witnesses, for appearing. I would like you, could each witness, please, starting from my left, please state your name and position title, and then swear either an oath or an affirmation, please. We'll start with you, Ms. Hassan.
My name is Khadija Hassan, and I work with Red Cross as the lead migration supports program. I solemnly, sincerely, and truly declare and affirm that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much. Ms. Rossiter.
My name is Madeline Rossiter. I work for Linking Communities Network, and I manage our domestic violence refuge for women and children. I swear that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God.
Thank you, Ms. Rossiter. Ms. Silvestro.
My name's Kira Lee Silvestro. I'm the Deputy CEO of Linking Communities Network, the lead agency for domestic violence and homelessness services in Western Murrumbidgee. And I swear that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Cox.
Hi, my name is Patricia Cox. I'm president of Griffiths Seroptimus Club. I swear that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God.
Thank you very much. And Mrs. Mead.
My name is Elizabeth Mead, and I'm the Secretary of Seroptimus International Griffith. I swear that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God.
Thank you very much. Would any of the organisations like to make a brief opening statement? You could take it into... Okay, so we'll start with Ms. Hassan from the Red Cross and proceed from there. Thank you.
Good morning. I acknowledge the lands of the Wiradjuri people and pay my respects to elders past and present. This Refugee Week, Australian Red Cross is proud to recognise and celebrate the stories, resilience and strength of people seeking asylum and refugees, as well as their invaluable contribution to our local communities. Australian Red Cross welcomes the opportunity to provide evidence today and recognise the inquiry as an important mechanism to identify and address the risks faced by temporary migrants in rural and regional New South Wales. Australian Red Cross does have regional offices in Griffith, Lytton and Wagga. During the last financial year, we have provided individual support to approximately 65 people who have come to us seeking financial, legal and emotional support after experiencing severe exploitation in the community. With your permission, I would like to highlight 2 points. Temporary migrant workers in rural and regional New South Wales face significant barriers to accessing support and remedies either because of their visa status or lack of appropriate and suitable services. Regional and rural communities, local councils and often under-resourced frontline services then face the challenge and the cost of providing information.
Ms. Hassan, I'll just make sure... I might get you to move a little bit closer to the microphone or a bit closer to you. That's okay. Sorry to interrupt. Thank you very much.
Sorry, I am...
Down a little bit, it's quite high up. Yeah, great.
Thank you.
I am recovering from a cold, so I'm sorry. Regional and rural communities, local councils, and often under-resourced frontline services then face the challenge and the cost of providing information, protection and support to those temporary migrant workers in need. Our regional staff in the Western Riverina region, particularly in Griffith and Lytton, have assisted several migrant workers facing homelessness, food insecurity, and serious health issues. Some of these workers have told us they had disengaged from the PALM scheme or left their workplaces because they had been taken advantage of or exploited by employers and labour hire companies. People have reported being forced to work excessive hours, paid well below the minimum wage, and threatened by the agent that they could have them arrested and deported if they leave or tell authorities. The absence of a safety net and ongoing supports, including legal and migration advice to better understand their options and make informed decisions leaves migrant workers at risk of experiencing further exploitation and destitution, and at risk of being deceived by unscrupulous migrant agents and intermediaries that promise access to services and visas that, particularly speaking, they are not eligible for. Lastly, I would like to emphasize the need for increased efforts to equip frontline responders to proactively screen for modern slavery indicators and provide safe responses. Australian Red Cross, as auxiliary to the public authorities in the humanitarian field, stands ready to support the committee in strengthening the New South Wales Government response to modern slavery and welcomes the opportunity to provide evidence today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Hassan. Linking communities.
I really think that Ms Hassan has summed it up fantastically, and I reiterate all that she says in terms of service provision and the lack of responses that are available to migrant workers.
Thank you. I think Sir Optimus,
Yes.
Mrs Mead.
Yes,
Thank you.
I'd just like to give a little bit of context for Sir Optimus, which is a worldwide organisation of volunteers who work to educate, enable and empower women through raising awareness of issues, action and advocacy. Our Griffith Club has 31 members, and our submission stated that we first started advocating for better conditions for temporary overseas workers in 2018 when we worked with the Salvation Army's Freedom Partnership, End Modern Slavery, hosting a community forum. We actually started a bit before that, as Sir Optimists around Australia had become concerned about the safety of women backpackers, especially in remote locations. After the forum, we held a series of barbecues for overseas workers to try and provide a safe space where workers, especially women, could voice their concerns. We have also advocated since 2018 for the licensing of labour hire organisations in New South Wales. Through our work with the Griffith Local Domestic Violence Committee and the Multicultural Interagency Network, we were made aware of the problems facing the workers in the PALM scheme, especially women who are disengaged from the scheme and have no work rights and no medical cover, making them very vulnerable to exploitation. Unlike other organisations and individuals who are giving evidence today, we're not involved in frontline support for workers experiencing modern slavery. We have nothing to do with labour hire and we do not have lived experience. But we do live in Griffith and we do hear anecdotal evidence that things are not right in relation to the situation some of the overseas workers find themselves in, whether it be in relation to living conditions, working conditions or pay. We note that some of the issues and recommendations in our submission were referred to in a very interesting episode of the ABC's Radio National Big Ideas program on June 4th. It was all based on the PALM scheme and it was titled, "We Asked for Workers and Got People." We don't have the facts and figures and case studies, and when we were told about this inquiry, when we attended a meeting with the UN Special Rapporteur on Contemporary Forms of Slavery in Griffith last November, we indicated to a member of the New South Wales Modern Slavery Commissioner's staff that a submission from us would not hold any weight. He encouraged us to make our submission, and although it was very general in nature, we decided it was the right thing to do. So I guess we're saying we don't have a lot of facts and figures.
Thank you very much. Dr Kane, would you like to start off the questioning in this round? Thank you.
Sure. One of the things that I've been interested in and haven't had a chance to ask, but you're sort of on the front lines, is there any kind of, you're all experienced in dealing with women in the PALM scheme, and I wondered sort of within the community what the reception is to PALM workers, particularly women PALM workers. So you're all involved in being there when something happens, but what's the general kind of community response, particularly to women in the PALM scheme and the types of experiences that you're seeing?
I'll probably start. I think the community response to any workers that come into our country is very positive until something happens. And I would say that a lot of the community, apart from employers, are unaware of what is happening in our community in terms of, to these women and to men in terms of homelessness, women more so domestic violence that then results in homelessness. But I would say that there is a fantastic community of Griffith that embraces workers that come into our community. but are a bit naive about what happens when things go awry.
If I could perhaps follow up then. And we've been having this discussion, I think some of you have been here for the previous sessions. You mentioned that employers are aware. So what are employers, and are we talking about sort of the labour hire contractors, or are we talking about the farmers who engage them? They're aware, and if so, what kind of responses do we see from that layer of the supply chain, if you like?
I guess I can only report on the women and men that come to our service. I think it's a sense of both. I have no doubt that there's some dodgy labour hire people, companies around, but certainly the employers that people are employed under, particularly women I'm talking about, aren't very sensitive when domestic violence occurs, and it is a woman's responsibility to do something about that or to remove them from the employment because they're causing problems.
And is it often that the sort of perpetrator and the victim are in the same workplace, or?
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
Usually in the same dwelling, actually.
Mm.
Right.
Sorry, can you just clarify that again? It was quite...
So most of the women that we have seen have usually ended up in homelessness because of domestic violence, but usually the farmer has told them that they are required to leave because they're causing problems in the house. So these women are left with no work and nowhere to stay.
Could I just, sorry, and I'm being picky around this issue. So you said the farmer asked them?
Yes.
So
the employer.
So the employer being the actual producer of the goods, not an intermediary?
Yes.
So you've seen cases where the actual employer on the farm has made the decision that has ended up with these women being in a situation of homelessness or something else outside of their control, really. Okay, so we're not talking an intermediary here, we're talking about direct knowledge by the...
Yes.
And can I just clarify, sorry, because I appreciate we're talking about violence against women generally, and then you're a domestic violence service, but in this context, are we talking about violence perpetrated by the employer in a domestic context because people are living there, or are we talking about violence demonstrated by a partner that happens to be in a accommodation that is also a workplace accommodation? I do, like, as the examples, I'm just trying to get a sense of...
Yeah, I have seen both. So where the farmer has perpetrated violence and where another worker has also perpetrated
But in that sense, it wouldn't be domestic violence. So I guess what I'm trying to get at here is there is and maybe I'll just be really upfront about it. There is a tendency, sadly, in terms of racist approaches to how we look at violence, that people say people from other countries are perpetrating violence against women, that it's not actually an Australian, in inverted commas, problem. And so what I'm trying to get at here is the complexity around the fact that we have workers living in accommodation provided by their bosses, so the violence happens in a domestic setting, but it's not necessarily a domestic partner that is perpetrating that violence. So I'm just trying to, I wonder if you could unpack that a little bit for us. I think it's significant in terms of the perceptions.
Well, in some cases that I have seen, the farmer is in a domestic relationship, whether that be 100% consensual is up for debate, but where the farmer is in a relationship, for lack of a better word, with an employee, and then violence happens, whether that be by somebody else in the dwelling or by the farmer himself.
Okay. Thank you. It's an important distinction, and it's really helpful in that context.
So can I just follow that on a little bit? That is quite distressing, what you've described. So what avenues are available then to the woman who's been asked to leave in that circumstance where they've been the victim of violence, domestic violence, perhaps by the employer, perhaps by someone in their accommodation, but in any case, asked to leave? So what avenues are open to them then? And what happens in your experience?
Yep. So we've had several cases. They are referred to our Women's Crisis Accommodation Service that has availability. It's a crisis service, so accommodation up to 3 months. These women then have no access to any income at all. They may get a Red Cross payment, but they have no access to income. So our service is fully financially paying for those victims of domestic violence. Often those women are pregnant, so sometimes they're under the false assumption that if they have a child in Australia, that child automatically becomes an Australian citizen, which is not the case. They're under that assumption. Often these women have no choice but to return to employment because there's no avenue for ongoing financial aid for them, or they will return home.
So just take us a little bit further, because my understanding is if they are on the PALM scheme and they leave that employer,
Yep.
they are not then eligible to work. Is that correct? So what actually then happens? And so that's one question. I guess the other question I've got in mind is, can they report this? Do they report this to the PALM scheme authorities, and what happens? So two questions there.
Yep. Often women are too scared to report it. They want to continue working. They want to remain in Australia. So they will often seek employment elsewhere. What we see happen is that, I'll take you back a bit, in the first 3 months that they come here, they're required to repay their airfares and their accommodation, which is substandard and is costing them a huge amount per week. So within the first 3 months or 16 weeks, whatever it is that they are required to repay that money, they have absolutely nothing to live on, nothing to feed themselves, basically. So they're coming to services like ours, requesting financial aid, requesting food assistance to get them through the week. Then violence occurs, so they can no longer be under that employ, or if in some circumstances, and we don't talk about violence, we just talk about at risk of being beneath the poverty line, it's raining, so they don't work, so they're not paid. So that's a whole nother gamut of issues. But they want to keep working and they want to stay in the country, so often they'll try and seek other employment, whether that be out of town or not, but often that isn't very forthcoming for them. So they're left with very little options then, other than to seek some cash work, so therefore the employer is saying that they have abandoned their position, or return to their country, or they just go to ground and, you know, they may find someone in their own community that they can live with. And often we've heard of women looking after other people's children who, you know, might give them some money or somewhere to live.
So just to be clear, they don't report it. They're too scared to report it.
Yep.
Is there an avenue to report it?
There is an avenue with the Department of Immigration, I do believe. There's a...
Yeah, I believe there is a component of the PALM scheme where they are able to report such issues. However, in my experience and discussion with people from the PALM scheme, they often don't receive these reports until after a critical incident has occurred, is I think the language they use. So there's really not a lot of early intervention available for these women either, in terms of, you know, potentially removing them or putting them with another employer prior to then disengaging from the PALM scheme if they're no longer working for that employer.
Are you... Yes, sorry, I'm getting carried away
It
here,
might
sorry.
be one for Mr. Stein as well. So if the circumstance is that one of these critical incidents has occurred, and maybe reports made, but the woman needs to leave that circumstance and that employment, so does that mean that they're in breach of their visa if they leave without, even if it's a critical incident, if they leave that employment?
I'm not really sure if it's in breach. Generally what happens is the employment is linked to the visa. So what's the issue is if they don't have the employment, then that might affect their visa. But I don't know if this is usually taken up by the employers, and then it ends up to ending their visa status in the country. But usually when the employment ends, that's the outcome. And that's why a lot of the women are afraid to report, because if they lose the employment, they might lose the visa.
So it's not clear what happens if a critical incident is reported to their. It's not clear what happens to their visa status if a critical incident is reported.
I think it's pretty clear that their visa is no longer active.
Well, it's no longer active if they leave employment. But it sounds to me as though the reporting takes place after they leave employment. So we actually don't know if there's any mechanism for reporting a critical incident and for handling it.
It's certainly reported in some cases to the police, and AVOs are taken out. But in terms of, I guess, government departments in relation to their employment and visa status, these women are traumatised. They don't want to leave the country. They're often supporting families back home. So why should they have to leave as victims of violence?
Yeah, I agree. I guess the question for me is there should be a mechanism if an incident like that takes place for it to be reported and a person's visa not be jeopardised and for them to be able to receive support, counselling, protection. And as you say, Ms. Rossiter, there should actually be the ability to prevent that with early reporting. But I'm just not getting a sense that there's a strong mechanism to do that. And I accept that people might be scared to do it, but this is just exactly the situation where we need to make it as easy as possible so people are not scared. We need to be quite proactive, particularly from what you've described this morning, which is frankly quite distressing. My apologies.
No, I'm good.
Mrs. McDonald?
I was just wondering, Ms. Mead, what kind of state-based emergency supports are most needed for disengaged workers?
Well, as I said before, we're not on the front line, so it's a little bit difficult to say. But I just from what we've looked at, it would seem to me, especially with the PALM scheme, it's very difficult when you're looking at backpackers and other people because you have even less idea about where they are and what they're doing. But that some more checks and balances on the ground with people, working with the PALM scheme to actually find out what's going on the ground is a good idea. And I think the comments that were made by the Griffith Mayor earlier on today about the fact that council doesn't know who when a group of people are coming under the PALM scheme, that sort of thing, the more information that a community has, especially at that local government level, can help, especially with everybody, because that information should then go to the support groups and everything, so people have a better idea about what's going on. I hope that helps.
Yeah, no, it does, because, like you say, you can't monitor it if you don't know what's there. So, do you think that there should be, or what level of site visits or inspections of the schemes would be effective?
Well, it's very hard for me to say, but I think from what I've been told by other people, there are 4 PALM employers in this area, and I would think that maybe those employers should be visited once a month or something. I have no idea, but it's about that, just so that there's a regular check-up on what's going on, and probably not known about in advance, just so people know really what's going on.
Can I follow on that? From that, Mrs. Mead and Mrs. Cox, thank you. First of all, to say thank you for all of the support that you're doing and the Seroptimists are doing. It's so critical and such critical work. I wonder, I would imagine from the kinds of events you hold and the connections that you have with these workers that you might not have the facts and the figures, but you certainly have a knowledge of what the issues are and what problems people are facing. Do you feel like there's any ability for your members to have an avenue, or that there could be some ability for your members that are in a more stable situation in terms of your citizenship and your housing or whatever, to be able to make reports anonymously that would be different to the sort of vulnerability of the workers? I guess one of the things we keep hearing through this inquiry is that the vulnerability of the exploited workers is such that they are, for a whole range of reasons, not wanting to report, but also we're very critically aware that people know where the problems are, but people are pointed to the systemic issues around regulation. Do we need to start thinking about other avenues for things to be reported? And I'm thinking of examples like people being able to take things to fair trading, people can report to Crime Stoppers, there are all these other sort of, the Fair Work Ombudsman takes, complaints to look at underpayment of work. Like, do you see that there's any roles or avenues that might be able to play in terms of the community sharing that information to provide some improvements or protections?
Can I just say something first? I think I'm involved in another group called Rural Australians for Refugees, and I think it's very much the same sort of thing when people say, oh, we just want to help refugees, And I keep saying, yes, first we have to actually find our refugees, and I think which we have done, but you know what I mean? It's a matter of, can members of the community who aren't involved with help organisation service or, people providing services, even know who the people are?
Yes.
It is very, very difficult.
Yeah.
Very difficult. Sorry, Pat.
No, that's fine. And I agree with what Will has said, that as members of the community, we see people in the community that we are concerned about.
Yes.
We don't necessarily know their details. Through a variety of organisations. We know that there are issues, but we don't, we can't get information actually from them. We're not in that position to get the details and to take it on. So many people in the community wouldn't be aware that there are any issues.
Yes.
Because they're not involved. And there are some concerns that the issues that come to hand or come to light may show a poor vision of the employers, the farmers. And there are many farmers in the community who are really good, excellent workers. There's some concern about the hire contractors who don't have the same responsibility in New South Wales to their workers. They don't have to be licensed. So groups of workers, a body can get a group of workers together and pick them up, take them to work and do whatever. And that's something that, we are not always familiar with and can't do. As a group, we can say this is not good, but we don't have the actual information. And I know that from the Domestic Violence Committee, you hear statistics and think, that's terrible. Why isn't something being done? But who's going to do it?
Yeah. But just
to
build on that, I mean, the part of what we've heard from some of the councils is the fact that they just have no idea, and indeed the federal government appears to have no idea of how many palm workers are put into any local government area. So, for example, if that was communicated from a federal level, I guess there's sort of two elements to that. One is the sort of positive community connection and support, which potentially then, the council can inform the Surreptimists, so we've got additional workers coming, do you want to host some more barbecues or whatever is the case, but also from a crisis point of view, there's awareness of the resourcing that would then be needed to look at what's the potential of risks that go on. But if none of that is communicated, nobody can be ready to respond.
We don't know.
Can I just ask one about accommodation?
Sure.
Chair? And that is, I guess what I'm curious about is that these are private rental accommodations. People are paying exorbitant rents for uninhabitable accommodation. Does it seem like anyone has any understanding of what the obligations are under the Residential Tenancies Act, or is it simply that the assumption is with everybody involved that because this is accommodation linked to work, that it just can be whatever and it doesn't have to comply with any of those requirements? I'm curious about that because we keep getting this accommodation element brought up. We know the state of private rental accommodation is bad across the board, but there are regulations and laws that exist around those. I wonder if anyone has any thoughts from the accommodation side of things.
I think that certainly that's not highlighted to workers, and I think if we're talking about early intervention, let's educate people, not just women and men, who are coming on the PALM scheme about what their rights are in Australia, what their responsibilities are in terms of violence and our laws and what happens, but also that they do have rights. They don't just have to put up with substandard accommodation when they get here and don't have to put up with paying exorbitant rent that doesn't allow them any money for food. Let's pre-educate these people coming into our country and make the contractors also follow up with education along the way about what happens if, and this is where you can go to if this happens, and this is what violence looks like, and women don't have to put up with that in Australia. Let's do some of that education and stop the silos of the people that are coming in to genuinely work and genuinely send money back to their families in their own countries and have some education around that before they even enter Australia.
Can I just come in, and this is for Mr. Sarnan from the Red Cross as well. In your submission linking communities, you referred, this was in January, a dramatic increase in the number of people that you were seeing in the previous 8 months. Has that continued?
Yes, it has.
Okay. Yep. And so people are coming to you. Are the people coming to you, are they coming from employment locally, or are they coming from other regions outside of the Riverina?
Mostly local, but a smattering of places like Mildura, where the work situation has broken down there and there's violence been there, and they may have contacts in Griffith, so their contacts are saying, come here, you can get some work, and then that doesn't eventuate, but mostly from the local area.
And sort of what sort of numbers are we talking about?
So I think in this financial year, we've supported 47 women for a variety of different reasons. 99% of the time, that's domestic violence. But the other...
From the temporary migrant workers?
Yes, from the PALM scheme. And the other issues, which I think we've highlighted here, financial difficulties, uninhabitable accommodation, and people looking for assistance with their visas as well. So that's a big task for us as workers. We're not specialists in visas and that in particular, and that's a huge workload for us to add to as well.
And and of course the situation you describe is one in which women are incredibly vulnerable, no income, no mobility, not sure about English language skills, concerns around visa, so vulnerable from the outset, and then you're clearly seeing the effects of that in terms of people having offences basically or violence committed against them, and you're looking after them. So just confirm that's what we're talking about here. So you did mention that in some circumstances AVOs would be taken out. Is that correct?
Yes.
So that involves local police?
Yes.
So the police therefore are aware, presumably, of what's happened. Does anything follow on from that, or...?
Yes, that can come with also another added layer of complexity, depending on the type of AVO and the conditions that comes with. The woman might be excluded from actually that dwelling or that workplace, not through any fault of her own, even if she is a victim. But the other thing that most women actually say to us is they only called the police for the violence to stop, not for anything to follow on from that. So I think there's a general understanding that what has happened is not okay, but then I guess, in their own country, if they, we've had a woman, and this might be a bit harsh, but she said, I just thought the police would come and give him some whippings and then he would stop. So there's a quite clear lack of education around police and police responsibility and the police's duty of care and what they have to follow through with and what that looks like in the court system. But I think what we haven't actually raised here is, we see these women who have had these awful things happen to them. but we haven't talked about what happens to the perpetrator if he's also on the PALM scheme. There's very little repercussion for him as well. And I say him because it's mostly a man.
Yeah, I think Mrs. McDonald had another question.
Thanks.
I don't know where to start in terms of, because it seemed to me that the PALM scheme was set up with good intentions, you know, in terms of let's help our neighbours. It's a good form of aid. But then it also seems that from the get-go that we're working with vulnerable people who, you know, they've got obligations back home, so they don't want to upset the apple cart whilst they're here. But they are already exploited before they even get here because of their obligations back home, because they want to be able to send money for their families and things. So it seems to me that it starts with the visa setting, and that causes the disengagement because they don't want to be seen as troublemakers, and they're not troublemakers. It's just the environment that they're put in has already set them up to be exploited, and they're already vulnerable. What can we do to change that sort of, so that the good intention that it's meant to be is a good intention, and that it's a win-win rather than, you know, we're seeing these disengaged workers that don't have a good story.
Can I say that I think it comes back to right from the beginning with the PALM scheme, where it is advertised and what are the conditions that are on the advertisement. It appears that it's going to be a blessing for those. I can go to Australia, I can get work in Australia, I'll be able to support my family. Yeah. You don't know what are the conditions attached to it, that yes, but you have to repay your fare. There's all the work, everything else is conditional upon you doing exactly as someone tells you in the scheme where to work, etc. The accommodation is provided perhaps on the farm, so you don't have any travel, you don't have any way of getting out of it sometimes. You're stuck there to work. But I think it goes back to the original conditions. Who was accepted into the PALM scheme, what their understanding is of what they're going to be able to achieve for their families and for themselves. From a local point of view, the PALM scheme seemed to be in some ways offered as a remedy for a shortage of workers, and workers could be brought in, and for those who are employing the workers, the conditions attached to their employment may not be actually clear enough as to obligations as to employment, accommodation, those sorts of rates of pay, sufficient pay to enable them to live. So it's at the beginnings from both points of view, from Australia and from where the workers are coming from. What do we do? Yeah. Regulation somewhere and more information.
Ms. Hassan, I think you wanted to come in on that?
Yes. I just wanted to, when travelling to Australia, usually with the visa granted and the processes happen, usually the experience we've had is people are looking forward to coming and to be able to provide for their families. So it's always a good, like we see that it's a good opportunity for the people that are coming. The challenge is what's on the ground and the supports that are in place on the ground. So it's about, because like the linking community, I've talked about, you know, women facing domestic violence. And usually what happens is there's a lot of trauma and that impacts their mental health. And that, you know, and that support's not really there as well. So I think for us, what we would, like, you know, what we're seeing is the need for training frontline workers, whether this is an emergency setting in hospitals, and people being able to identify those indicators someone's going through exploitation or anything like this, rather than the experience of going there and the first thing you're faced with is, do you have Medicare? Can you provide your Medicare? Some of them are not able to do that. The other challenge is the language barrier. So if you're being faced, you're going through already a challenging situation, you're having probably a mental breakdown, and you go into an emergency setting and you're being asked questions that really is not at the top of your, priority. And someone not using your language, it makes it even harder for them to be able to go out and seek that support. We do work very closely with Lincoln Community, and that's a very good support for us. I work in a program that's focusing on mental health. We are funded by the Ministry of Health in New South Wales, but we're seeing a lot of cases from exploitation that's impacting their well-being and their mental health in the community. And this goes for both men and women. And so I think the main important thing is training services, whether it's the community services, frontline workers like the police and the hospital, to be able to identify these indicators and support, whether it's the women with children and the men as well, to be able to feel safe. The other thing I just wanted to mention very quickly is when the women are presenting, I'll focus on the women here for a moment, when they're presenting an emergency and there's someone else coming in with them, I think it's very, I think we've seen a lot of unfortunate cases, people assuming that this is a safe person for them and this is the person to interpret for them, which is not usually the right thing in our experience. If the woman's given a private space with a proper interpreter, without the person that's walked in, even though they seem that they're the right person or they've provided their transport, most of these indicators are usually missed, because our experience is the women say, if they gave me a safe space, I would have spoken about it, but I didn't have a chance. Some of the women who've gone through sexual assault or rape in the hospital are not able to bring that up because maybe the perpetrator is right there with them and is the language support for them.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask one question, because I just am aware that the Soroptimists mentioned that originally you were involved in and connected with people also on working holiday visas, and just an awareness around that. And I just wondered if you had any comments, because we've focused very much on a discussion about Palm Scheme, and I just wondered whether you or indeed others on the panel had contributions you'd like to make about those potential risks which are different to the Palm Scheme.
Yeah, I think, well, they're different in the way that nobody needs to know who's just come into town yesterday looking for a job. So there's even less regulation or no regulation.
Yeah.
And as I said, there had been stories that, and we were actually asked by a person who did work for Griffith City Council at that stage to work on these barbecues, because it wasn't Palm Scheme, it was just people who were coming into town looking for work from overseas. And in a way they face very much the same situations as far as accommodation, whatever. We had one of our Soroptimist members who used to come to the barbecues and say, well, I can find you some better accommodation if you need it. And they weren't tied to particular accommodation providers, so they could do that, which is a bit different again to the Palm Scheme. But, I think it's the same underlying story, and I still think a lot of it goes back to the fact that the labour hire organisations don't have to be registered or licensed, and so people, especially when they come into town looking for something quickly, can get into the hands of the wrong people and not have a good experience after that. Especially the more remote they are, of course, and the harder it is for them to get help, the worse it becomes.
Okay, thank you very much to all the witnesses. We'll excuse you now. I presume that you will be able to take questions on notice from us and reply to them. So thank you very much for agreeing to that. I realise that we have run over a little bit on our timing, but I appreciate I appreciate you bearing with us on that, because it's quite important that we did hear from you. So thank you very much. So we'll excuse you and move to our next witnesses. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
couple of minutes, everyone's just settling down. We might.
I feel the cold.
We might get underway. Welcome, Ms. McRae, Dr. Beck. Welcome to the hearing today. I just need you to state your name and position, title, and then make either an oath or an affirmation before giving evidence. So could we start with you, Ms. McRae?
Sure. Ms. Anita McRae, and I'm the Senior Manager of Priority Populations for the Murrumbidgee Primary Health Network, and I solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much, Dr. Beck.
Dr. Trudy Beck, GP obstetrician and clinical council member of the Murrumbidgee Primary Health Network. I solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much. Now, would either of you like to make a brief opening statement? Ms. McRae would.
Please.
Perhaps Dr. Beck would as well, but I'll start with you, Ms. McRae.
Sure. So firstly, thank you for the opportunity to appear at the hearing today. This is a joint statement on behalf of the Murrumbidgee Primary Health Network, known as MPHN, and today the organisation is represented by myself, Anita McRae, and Dr. Trudy Beck. My role at the PHN is Senior Manager Priority Populations, and Dr. Beck, as you just heard, is General Practitioner in Wagga, but he's also a member of our Wagga Wagga Clinical Council. And just for context, clinical councils are an important part of our governance infrastructure and assist in the identification of opportunities to improve primary healthcare across the Murrumbidgee region. Late last year at one of our clinical council meetings, Dr. Beck alerted MPHN to issues she was experiencing in relation to migrant workers seeking health services not covered under their visa arrangements. Dr. Beck is best placed to respond to your questions in relation to these issues. However, we have since received similar feedback from practice nurses who have reported an increase in presentations from non-Medicare eligible people from multicultural backgrounds who are seeking advice and support in two key areas, being unintended pregnancies and sexually transmitted infections. One of the roles of the PHNs is to commission primary health services to meet population health needs with a focus on access and equity. And we do this by understanding the health needs of various population groups and look at ways we can support people within our remit and funding abilities. Given the anecdotal reports from clinicians in our region, we recently received approval to undertake a comprehensive health needs assessment of the region's multicultural communities. And the aim of this work is to better understand the unique health challenges and needs of these groups in the Murrumbidgee region. So whilst the work is yet to commence, we can provide a copy of the final report to this committee once it's available. Additionally, MPHN funds various health and mental health services available for people without a Medicare card. We also provide localised health pathway information to the region's clinicians to help them provide appropriate care to migrant patients within their practice. To close, MPHN acknowledges the issues surrounding migrant health is complex and multi-layered and will require a human-centred systems change to ensure adequate health and wellbeing support is available to migrant workers. And so thank you.
Dr. Beck, do you want to make an opening statement?
I guess just briefly to set context that I've been really passionate about this issue for probably 3 to 4 years since I became aware of the issues surrounding this in my local community. I did make a submission to the inquiry, however, at the last moment the MPHN decided not to put that submission in, and that probably gave more context around my specific concerns around this issue. I guess I'd just like to acknowledge my privilege and understand that the evidence that I will be putting forward today, I hope, is an adequate reflection of the issues that face the women that I aim to help, but by no means is it an exhaustive understanding of the challenges that they face.
Thank you. Can I just clarify with you, Ms McRae, the health needs assessment of multicultural communities, when will that work be completed?
So we'll commence engaging, it's about commissioning a consultant to conduct that health needs assessment, and so that will commence from 1 July. So within that activity, there's funding that we've received to conduct the health needs assessment, as well as a small amount of funding to start doing activities that will help address needs that arise.
So just conscious of our committee's timeline, it would be
Sure.
good if we could have some information, if you could share information with us ahead of when your report might be completed, because we're hoping obviously to make recommendations before the end of the year. So just flag that with you.
Before the end of the calendar year?
Yeah.
Sure. We will absolutely have some information that we can share, whether it's the final report or not. We would be happy to share an interim report to meet your deadlines.
So you said just you indicated that that you are able to provide health services to
Yes.
women who are not Medicare eligible.
Yes, yes.
So, but obviously, if the women are going to have a baby, they will need to go to hospital. So, does that include antenatal care and hospital care? And then how does the provision of those services work? Is it ongoing? Is it comprehensive? Is there a limit to the services you can provide?
So what I would say on that is the funding that we receive from the Commonwealth Department of Health, Disability and Aged Care is for commissioning services into the community. We provide support to general practice, practice health support and whatnot, but practices are their own businesses. So that is certainly to the side of our commissioning of services that we receive funding for. There is no requirement that people have Medicare cards to access our services that we commission, and they are free services. That's part of the requirement. I guess some of the issues are around people's awareness of that and understanding of what is available to them.
So just if someone, does that mean that someone who's not Medicare eligible could approach a general practice and receive care, or they would have to know a particular general practice? How does it work?
I think it would, yeah.
So my understanding I would say I work extensively in this space, and I have talked to hospital-based services about this as well, is that there is no consistency across the board in the type of health coverage that migrant visa workers will have. So we aren't to know, and often the patient accessing care won't know what their health coverage will and won't cover. I would say that probably comes back to basic lack of education or understanding around healthcare literacy, which I would say in Australia, the average Australian doesn't have very good health literacy around those things. So when you add in a language barrier, it's particularly difficult. But my experience of it has been that from a purely medical perspective, and I think Anita may be referring more to some of the allied health services like mental health services or counselling, from a purely medical perspective around providing reproductive health care, there is no funding. And I would say that the rebates that the patient would receive from their private health insurance is highly variable, but in my experience, the majority of the costs will be borne by the woman.
And in reality, if that woman can't afford it,
the onus would then be on a practice to provide services for free.
So when we're saying that people are getting some level of service, it's basically the cost is being covered informally.
My experience in a private practice setting, which I would say where the majority, if not all, early pregnancy care occurs, would be that the classic scenario that we have become familiar with, we're providing services to upwards of 500 to 600 pregnant women per year, would be that often a male would call our reception. They often will have limited English, and we now know we've trained our reception staff to understand that we know what that call will likely be in relation to, usually around pregnancy choice. We then ask them what language they speak, and we try to in some way convey information to them around when an appointment would be available. And then we have the same issues that some of the previous speakers were talking about in terms of difficulties with managing confidentiality and the woman's risk in a consult, so often have to ask males who are company to leave. They're often travelling from Griffith or Leeton area, or sometimes locally, have been driven over by someone because most of the time they don't drive. We then usually have asked what language they speak, so we allow more time because we have to use the National Interpreter Service, which thankfully we do have access to that regardless of Medicare status. And then basically the story is the same every time. They have an unplanned, unwanted pregnancy and they want to talk about pregnancy options. Change to the legislation in 2019 meant that we no longer as clinicians had to ask questions about the intentions or like around what the circumstances around the pregnancy, but because we were seeing this recurring theme, I started asking every woman why she was having it, what kind of work she was doing, who was in her like social circle, because I was interested as to why we had this recurring theme all the time. And basically the story is the same every single time. They're a Pacific Island worker, they're here to support their family, they often already have children at home being looked after by other relatives, and they're here to earn money to send back to their families. They find themselves pregnant, they know that they will breach their visa requirements to be able to work, either because they're in a physical job, in the kinds of positions that they often are working in, and then they will either not be able to continue doing that job because it's heavy lifting, or if they keep the baby, they will have to go home because they won't be able to work as per the conditions of their visa. So I would say the majority of the time, even with what we call non-directive pregnancy counselling, where we offer the options around continuing what that would look like, because I'm now aware of what options exist in that space as well, specifically for visa workers, I should say. I would say 95% of the time they would pick a termination, and not because of personal choice necessarily. So then we have formed relationships with local allied services like pharmacy, so that we can give them the card of how to get to, because they're usually from out of town, how to get to the pharmacy. We pre-alert the pharmacist that someone will be coming, because the pharmacist has requirements around prescription of restricted medications. We financially consent them because those medications are not covered by a PBS, obviously, and they're around the $500 mark. And then we try to do basic screening like you would for any Australian Medicare eligible woman, which is the basics of chlamydia and gonorrhea screening, because it's extensively prevalent in these communities. Chlamydia and gonorrhea screening obviously is not covered by the MBS, so they have to pay for it. Also cervical screening in alignment with Australian guidelines, which they usually haven't had done, and then talk to them about contraception. Most of the time we're doing contraception for free because there's no, they don't have money. A reversible long-acting contraceptive, which is gold standard, will cost them upwards of $500 for the device and insertion. So essentially, if you wanted to provide a gold standard appointment to one of these women in this really difficult circumstance, not even taking into account their psychosocial risk factors like their housing or their domestic violence or their mental health, excluding all of that, a gold standard purely medical consultation would cost them $1,500. They don't have that money. Yeah. And sorry.
You continue.
Sorry.
No, it's really
I guess it's just this is something that I have held deeply difficult personal feelings around.
Yeah.
Because it's such an ethics and values clash for me. And I gave a Hippocratic oath when I started medicine, and it doesn't feel good, and no one will listen.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No. Thank you, Dr. Beck, and don't be at all sorry. It's the evidence we're hearing today is grim, and I think all of us are feeling the same level of horror about what is occurring under the watch of where things are at. So thank you for saying it, and it's really powerful for you to be able to put this on the record, because it means that we can also share the burden of what we do about it.
And there's nothing that an individual can do.
Indeed.
I have approached local employers and I've said to them, we're seeing this, would you be motivated to work with us?
Yes.
And they say, no, we're in where within our requirements for our visa provision, like we're not interested, and we're like, we will provide services for your women specifically, and there's been no goodwill around them cooperating with us in any way. I've spoken to the hospital about it. They will say they have the same problems as us, and they're like, we provide the service and issue a bill. Like, you know, there's no, I've obviously escalated it to my local state member, I've escalated it to my primary health network, but because it's such an unseen population, because they're so scared to, I've asked them to go to the media, they're reluctant to do that because they don't want to go on record. It's an unseen population that, like, on a weekly basis, we're seeing multiple of these women, and it gets your blood going every time.
Can I ask you, Dr. Beck, and I think everyone is, it was in the last session as well, and I feel like we've kind of reverted back to this, we know that people don't fall pregnant, right? And people are using that language, which to me usually indicates that people are implying that that person did not intend to be pregnant or potentially did not consent to the intercourse that made them pregnant. I wonder in this context, because I feel like there's another complexity here, which is that are we talking about wide-scale levels of sexual assault that are occurring, or are we talking about, as we heard in the other misinformation that exists around the potential to become pregnant that then means that that may change visa statuses or provide citizenship or other things? Do you have a sense of what that looks like? Because I think and in the last session I was concerned about the kind of the concept of it being positioned as domestic violence services when in actual fact we were talking about issues that were happening within a workplace of assault. And so I just wonder if either of you have any reflections on that.
I think that's an impossible question to answer, because we know that in an Australian-based, English-speaking, relatively health literate population, you have an above 50% unplanned pregnancy rate. So I think it's difficult to know how big a role coercion or sexual violence plays in the unplanned pregnancies that we see. I certainly think that there's significant cultural challenges around prevention of those pregnancies, be them from unwanted sexual intercourse or not, because a lot of these workers are coming from cultures where religiously contraception is not widely accepted. And that's one of the real challenges with prevention of recurrent unplanned pregnancies, is that for many of the women, it goes against their religious beliefs to engage in contraception, which I respect and don't, like, it's not my job to be engaged in coercion around that.
Yeah, indeed.
But I certainly think that if you look at the basic understanding within an Australian population of where babies come from, there's a gap in the pre-work that we do with people coming to Australia around like how to safely access services, local availability of services, which is something we've talked about with the Clinical Council, which is even if there's no reform to visa practices, at least would there be capacity for primary health network to take a role in making aware to big employers, and we know who they are, how women can access services safely locally. But I think really the kind of work I do only really scratches the surface around the healthcare inequities, because, you know, when you're dealing with a woman who for her an unplanned pregnancy is an emergency, there's limited scope because of all the things that we've talked about how to go beyond the basics of healthcare needs right then and there to then a more biopsychosocial model, which is what we would all aspire to look at the other factors that are contributing to the situations that they're currently finding themselves in.
So I'm just, would you like, anyone else like to ask some questions? Mrs. McDonald? Yes.
Sorry. Are you collecting, say, any data that distinguishes the experience of, say, women in temporary migrant worker schemes versus men? And do you think there is a gap in understanding how gender affects their vulnerability to be exploited?
I wouldn't say that we're collecting data that is that specific, and I think what we know is there's a lot that needs to be done to understand multicultural communities as a whole, and as well as portions of that community who we're talking about today. So I would say we don't have a good understanding.
Yeah, and I think also when you look at this space, because so much of it's pushed into private providers, we already don't have the resources to provide basic levels of care, let alone look to data collection. So there's obvious gaps in all this, like for all of the reasons that you've probably already heard about, there's a data desert.
Yeah. Yeah, and to your knowledge, when they present to either GPs or nurses or health outreach, are those teams given guidance to sort of detect that that these people could be subject to modern slavery risks? And if so, what do they do?
I'd say it would vary greatly as to what that looks like and what individual organisations do in that space around screening. And I think there is more that needs to be done there, and certainly around data collection as well. There's a multicultural framework that we're looking to implement that includes things like better data collection and looking at having that, spreading that across at least the services that we come into contact with and commission, who we can have that, we can put that into contracts with them to make sure they do.
And then just one, when patients are presenting, are they disclosing that they were discouraged or prevented by employers or their labour hire providers from seeking medical advice or treatment?
I've never had that experience.
No.
I would say that most of the time I don't think that their employers would be aware of the situation, because the majority of the referrals we now get are word of mouth, because there's obviously major employers, and within those circles the workers talk and they find out about us because of that, not necessarily because they were directed to us by their employer.
Yeah, okay, so it's within their own sort of networks rather than a formal relationship.
I would say like 99% of the time it's by word of mouth that they've heard of us from other people who have had the same thing happen.
Yeah, okay.
Dr. Kane?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you both so much for being here, and thank you so much for the work you do, Dr. Beck. There's a couple of questions. One, did you in your introduction say that the network was going to put in a submission and then didn't?
So it'll be good to clarify that. So there was the intention of the local health district and the PHN to put in a joint submission, which Trudy referred to and was going to have involvement in that. That didn't eventuate, and I am unclear as to why that didn't eventuate. And I can seek clarification for that for the group.
And I don't, and obviously not wanting to put anyone on the spot, but Dr. Beck, you authored that.
I wrote a submission.
Is there the possibility for us to have that as an individual submission from you?
I did try and I've tried to explore afterwards ways to do it, and that wasn't possible, but I have forwarded it to, I've forwarded it to a couple of members, but I can do that.
That would be great if that's a possibility. Great. And then I have a question about the efforts that you've been making in the local community. So we've had various discussions this morning about different actors in the scheme. You know, there's systemic issues, but there's lots of actors in the scheme. And I'm interested in what sounded at best like indifference and at worst antipathy towards the women experiencing this. And I just wondered, as I said, I'm trying to sort of unpick a bit the different narratives we're getting about particularly employers and their responsibilities. You've given a sense, I guess, of the lack of engagement. Are there any sort of exemplars out there that you've seen, or has it been overall?
I think it's, again, difficult to say that. I know that it's a really difficult position to be in, because I don't have a lot of time to pursue this without results. And so initial attempts were fairly gentle at trying to get major local employers who we were seeing patients from all the time to take some accountability for the fact that they weren't orientating their workers in a way that I felt was probably basic. I guess I have escalated that over time to be more involved with the media and highlighting the issues that exist at a larger level. And then again, I can't really speak for, I mean, abortion access in New South Wales is incredibly difficult. And when they talked about when Roe v. Wade was overturned in the US about the distances that women had to travel over there and people were outraged, I was like, you have women travelling that far in New South Wales already, like, why are we surprised about this? The distances that women are travelling to access our services are just so big that engagement with employers in Griffith, for example, is really difficult when they're not even like part of our health network locally. So, I mean, hats off to the GPs in Griffith who are managing this with limited resources, because the other challenge that we're all facing is we have women who are missing the window of opportunity to have medical termination because they can't get into a doctor in Griffith, then they can't find out who provides these services locally, then they can't get into an ultrasound service till another week later. So by the time they make it to me, they're 12 weeks. They can't have a medical termination. So then we have to have the discussion about the fact that there's not surgical termination services in our area. So then I'm saying to them, well, you can drive 500 kilometres to Sydney. Here's a clinic that I work closely with that will do it. But by the time you get to that point, they're so defeated that I have women now who are like, well, I do actually want this baby, so I will keep the baby, I will see you for my pregnancy care, and then they'll get on a plane at 34 weeks, go home, have the baby, leave the baby with family to come back on their, like they literally use their annual leave to go home and have a baby and then come back to work.
Okay.
But Dr. Beck, you also indicated earlier that in 95% of cases, though, you felt people, I thought you said 95% of cases actually choose termination.
Yeah, so
and I think you said it was not, but it was not, your sense was it was not actually a personal choice. It was, and I think that quite distressed you as well.
Well, I think that's the most distressing part of it. Like, I got involved in what is legal reproductive healthcare in Australia because there's limited people who want to do that in regional areas. And I guess when you go back decades, I don't necessarily see myself as a pro-choice person. I see myself as a doctor who will practice within an ethical framework to give that patient the care that they need. So I actually find it really difficult to provide termination services for a woman where that's not her deeply held desire. Like, I think that's the crux of the matter for me, is around if this woman was in her home country and had the means to live above the poverty line, she would have this baby. And that is just such an ethics and values clash for me, that's what makes me want to reach out to people to say, can we make this better? Because I just don't think that that's a system that we should be engaging in ongoing support or facilitating that, because the system that we have at the moment, that's what it's doing.
And just to follow up on that, Dr. Sorry, you go.
Yeah. Questions. I wanted to just go back again to where we started on this, which was you're admirably trying to reach out to other stakeholders and see if they can, and we're talking about employers, and you mentioned that these were larger employers, because often we think that the behaviour that we need to be concerned about are with those that are under the radar. But what we're hearing is that in terms of an ethical responsibility, let's put aside the legal responsibilities, that the larger employers are also...
They're big companies that have entire HR departments. I understand that they're paying minimum wage, and I understand that they're meeting other Australian employment requirements. But if you're this is again the whole issue around modern day slavery, is that as soon as you have some form of coercion to keep a person in that job, and you don't provide them with what would be considered to all of us as basic human rights, then I think they're breaching ethical codes left, right and centre. Maybe they don't ask the questions, and maybe they don't get involved with people at an intimate level about their day-to-day lives. But I think as humans, we have an obligation to each other to have a level of decency that would mean that we would care about these issues.
And speaking of coercion, going back to your previous answer, the fact that women can't make the free choice that they would make in different circumstances, in essence, is a form of, I guess, systemic coercion for them to have
I
to...
believe so.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Ms Leong, did you
Yeah,
want to...
thank you. I just wanted to follow up on that because we also have heard the other side of that, Dr. Beck, earlier today in the evidence that we heard, where we heard that women who are in a situation where they give birth and then are not in a position to support the child are forced to go back into work and then have lost contact with their children as a result. And I guess I wonder, in terms of all of those possible outcomes and the outcomes that you've talked about, they're all horrific and unacceptable. Making a simple decision to say that all of these workers would have access to Medicare or access to the healthcare we need, would we then alleviate a lot of these problems? What's the obvious, like if we could right now take one thing to say, right, we take the pressure that is sitting on you with your day-to-day interactions with these people off, leaving aside that you've tried the soft approach to go to employers and it seems, you know, to your point, they're not asking the questions. Well, I don't think they want to ask the questions because they know the answer, right? We know full well that they could ask the questions, but they don't want to know the answer, so they don't ask the question. What, from a medical perspective, from a care perspective, what's the thing that solves it right now? We can't fix the visa scheme.
Yeah.
Like we can't.
No.
If we can't fix the visa scheme, we can't deal with the kind of the level of regulation. From your perspective, from healthcare for these women, what's the fix?
Well, I've thought about this a lot as well.
Yeah.
So I think that firstly, I would like to see some kind of obligation from the employer to orientate workers to local systems, because I think that, like we've heard before, if you're English second language, you have a different cultural lens on healthcare, or like someone said before, the police. I think that there needs to be local orientation to services. In an ideal world, again, I've thought about this, the government doesn't necessarily have an obligation to solve every migrant visa worker's long-term health problems. I accept that, and I understand that that's not a cost that needs to be borne by the state government. But I think that there needs to be an understanding that humans have sex, and we're not going to change that. And it is still a woman's right to choose whether or not she has contraception. So I think that there needs to be an understanding or an allowance made in either, I don't know whether it be Medicare and the PBS or whether it be under private health insurance, that there needs to be a clearly understood minimum level of health insurance for a woman coming into the country. And I think that for those predictable outcomes that women can find themselves in, because I think realistically, but in those women from 20 to 45, pregnancy and sexually transmitted infections and cervical and breast screening are going to be the core, that there needs to be an agreement reached to say that that the state government bears some cost for that. Because we know what those things are. Like, the government can put can put a contained boundary around what they're willing to support access to.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the members of the panel? Yes,
Sorry,
Mrs McDonald.
What do you think, say, do you have a question? No, you go. No, I've asked a question, you go.
So you've spoken about contraception a fair bit, but and I do understand the importance, and I appreciate you sharing all of that. Thank you very much. But what else would be the priority, just as a follow-up from the Deputy's question, what else would be a top priority? Like, what are these people coming in, and what are the issues that, the medical issues, I should say, that they're currently dealing with? So other than antenatal care, contraception, what else would be the top priority for the state or the federal government to consider? Say the state government.
Well, I guess because I work almost exclusively in women's health, and the main reason that women in a reproductive lifespan access healthcare is for reproductive health, that's still my number one thing. Partly because I believe that the ethics and values clash that a visa creates are, like, we've created that problem. whereas most other health conditions are like, you know, they're not created by your employment model, if you know what I mean. It's really tricky. I mean, in an ideal world, you'd like to see migrant visa workers, particularly if they're here for extended periods of time, like some of them are, have access to screening, like population-based screening. But again, I know that that comes down to risk-benefit cost analysis, like even things like immunisations. They're all the basic things that we do in primary care that we don't have the capacity to do any primary care from a medical perspective with this population.
Yeah, and so there's been examples, say, with funding that was specific around COVID-19 vaccinations, where there was funding that was specifically for people who didn't have Medicare cards to ensure that there was vaccinations, but that's an exception.
Yeah, and it comes down to then individual practices deciding how far they're willing to push the barrow on what would be called the Medicare pub test in terms of like what access we can get to emergency medications through our doctor's bags, like do we not vaccinate pregnant women for RSV, which is a very expensive vaccination because they're non-Medicare eligible? Like, we as a practice have had to decide where our line in the sand is about what things we feel comfortable to push the barrow on to give gold level of care within a gold standard level of care within a system that doesn't support that.
And you made reference through the chair, if I may, through STIs that are being transmitted. So I'm just curious to know, is there some kind of an awareness campaign that can be funded that can essentially let these individuals know what the risks are? And when they come in, do they actually know that this is what they're suffering from?
I think there is certainly a role to play, and PHNs do this, around that awareness, and Dr. Beck has spoken around that induction and around health services, and that can include health information. So there's certainly a role to do that. I think it needs to be targeted and acknowledge that there are specific, there are some cultural considerations as well as language barriers and whatnot to ensure that the information is accessible in every meaning of the word.
And I think that, to be like blunt, the flu or COVID or gonorrhea or chlamydia don't respect your visa status. So you're putting your broader population at risk if you have a hotspot of community members who are not screened or prophylactically treated for things. So again, to my knowledge, there's absolutely no education around that when a woman comes in, and we know that in certain populations, 25% of the population will have chlamydia or gonorrhea within a 12-month period. So if you then put that burden into the broader community, you're then going to create epicentres of sexually transmitted infections that surround migrant visa populations, not because they want to be spreading that, but because they're not given the opportunity to have free healthcare for something that affects the entire community.
I understand. And just in regard to that, with the health information that is currently provided, I mean, what kind of funding is around that, and would better funding assist in that?
Absolutely. Funding that is specific for that and targeted to enable better education. And like I said, it's not just translating a piece of information that is in English into different languages. So it does take funding to be able to do that job properly.
Yeah. So other than it, being written in black and white and translated, how else would it be enabled?
Oh, I think there's a big role in community development and actually people communicating these messages, and it's not a once and done kind of thing either. That continuous education, as Dr. Beck set out before, just within the broader Australian population, we have some issues with that.
We're already good at doing this within our Aboriginal medical services, where we have healthcare workers who have more cultural competence with these groups of people. So I would think that in large employers, you should have staff members who have specific additional training, who aren't threatening to the populations that they're working with, who have an understanding of local systems, who can allay fears around, like there's often lots of rumours around what's going to happen if you present with this. And I think that there's an obligation again on employers to have well-trained, culturally appropriate staff members that can convey this information in a way. like I know sometimes what I talk about gets entirely lost in translation because it's not, even if it's with a translator, it's not done in a way that is meaningful to them. And so like that's where I acknowledge that my ability to advocate for this is limited by my cultural understanding.
Can I ask just on notice, Ms McRae, in relation to the comments, I'm always keen to pull out the positive silver lining out of the COVID pandemic, and we saw that there were lots of things that governments did to lift people out of poverty, to deal with funding health services properly, that then stopped.
Yes.
I wonder, on notice, are you able to share what was rolled out in terms of the examples of the COVID vaccine and the kind of levels of support that could be then used as examples for other types of good primary health care in that area? Just because I think it's useful to take those models and as of an example of this is how it worked, and this is a model for how the state could step in again.
Yeah.
Okay, and Mrs McDonald, do you want to ask a question on notice? Yep.
To do with, and you alluded to it, Dr. Beck, in saying, epicentres. So do you think there are risks that failing to address these health access issues could perpetrate cycles of vulnerability, not just here and in the communities here, but when, like for generations, or when they do go back home? Yeah. It's an on notice, so you don't have to answer
On
it
notice
now.
question, good. And I'll add a question to that. So I'm puzzled that there was a submission that was supposed to have been made between the PHN and the LHD that somehow didn't get made. Presumably, Dr. Beck, sounds like Dr. Beck as though you were involved in substantially in helping with that submission.
I put my submission forward, and then when I went to look on the website to find it, it wasn't there. And
Right,
so then
because you were putting that in through the PHN
Correct.
and the LHD. So, so it would be important for you to clarify, I guess, if you're able to put your own submission forward, given your whatever contractual status you have with the LHD. I'm not sure what the rules.
Absolutely, Dr. Beck is,
Okay.
able to, and I think is already.
So that's one, but what connected to that is there is a concern in the committee has come across about the preparation of frontline workers, awareness of frontline workers. You're aware clearly, Dr. Beck, with your experience, but a concern has been raised, and I think we share that concern about general knowledge amongst health staff about people who present to emergency departments. So the question on those will relate to levels of awareness in the health worker population about this issue. So I'll just leave that there. Thank you very much for your evidence. We'll bring this public hearing to a close now and excuse the witnesses. Thank you for your evidence.
Thanks.
And thank you, everybody. And we'll close the hearing. Thank you.